The readings were impossible. According to the Talaxian medical scanner, human Paul Baker possessed not one, but two hearts beating in perfect synchronicity. That can't be right, Rhea thought, her multifaceted eyes narrowing as she stared at the holographic display. The Zephyr Station's medical bay, usually a haven of predictable biological data, felt suddenly alien. The low hum of the station's life support systems, the faint scent of sterilized plasteel, and the distant chatter of a dozen alien languages faded into background noise as she focused on the impossible data in front of her. Rhea, a young Talaxian nurse barely out of her training rotation, prided herself on her analytical abilities. Talaxians were known for their meticulous approach to medicine, their minds like highly efficient diagnostic computers, but this defied all logic. Scanner malfunction, she murmured, tapping a series of commands on the console. The diagnostic check initiated, a progress bar appearing on the screen. She watched it intently, the rhythmic beeping of the scanner momentarily filling the silence. A moment later, the screen flashed green. Nominal, Rhea frowned. The scanner, atop of the line Talaxian Medi-Scan 7000, was rarely wrong. Still, protocol demanded verification. She reinitiated the scan, focusing the beam on Paul Baker's chest cavity. The scanner whirred, emitting a soft, pulsating blue light. The holographic display flickered, then stabilized, once again showing the unmistakable image of two distinct hearts, each pumping blood in perfect unison. Two bright, rhythmic pulses dominated the screen. Rhea reviewed Paul Baker's medical history, pulling up his file with a flick of her wrist. The datapad displayed a standard human profile. Age 34, height 18 meters, weight 82 kilograms. Occupation, engineer, stardust drifter. Allergies, none listed. Immunizations, up to date. But there was absolutely no record of any heart-related abnormalities, no mention of a congenital defect, no indication of a surgical implant. Mr. Baker, Rhea began, her voice carefully neutral as she turned to face the human who was currently reclined on the bio bed. The scan results are unusual. It appears you have two hearts. Paul Baker, a man of average build with neatly cropped brown hair and eyes the color of weathered steel, simply raised an eyebrow. Two hearts, you say? Well, that's news to me. He seemed more bemused than alarmed, his expression betraying a hint of dry amusement. Rhea blinked, momentarily thrown off by his reaction. Most patients would be exhibiting signs of panic, confusion, or at the very least, concern. Baker's calm demeanor was unexpected. You weren't aware of this condition? Nope, Paul replied, a slight smile playing on his lips. Always felt pretty healthy, though. Maybe that's why. Rhea suppressed a sigh. Humans. She made a mental note to adjust her bedside manner for future human patients. To understand the implications, I'll need to run further, more detailed scans, a full cardiological analysis, a genetic marker test. The works. It will require authorization from my supervisor, of course. Rhea input the request for advanced scans, sending it to Supervisor Voren. Voren, a middle-aged Talaxian with a reputation for strict adherence to protocol and an even stricter budget, was unlikely to approve the request without a compelling reason. Her datapad chimed a moment later, Voren's image appearing on the screen. The supervisor's expression was a mask of skepticism. Nurse Rhea, are you aware of the backlog in Sector Gamma? We cannot afford to waste resources on frivolous investigations. Unless you have concrete evidence of a serious medical condition, I suggest you adhere to the pre-flight protocol and clear the patient. Rhea took a breath, carefully choosing her words. Supervisor, the initial scans indicate a significant physiological anomaly. The patient appears to possess two fully functional hearts. While he exhibits no immediate symptoms, the long-term implications are unknown. Further investigation is warranted. Voren's expression softened slightly, though his tone remained curt. Two hearts. An intriguing anomaly, I'll grant you that. Very well, I will authorize the additional tests. But be warned, Nurse Rhea, the Zephyr station operates on a tight schedule. Efficiency is paramount. Do not let this curiosity interfere with your duties. Understood, Supervisor, Rhea replied, suppressing a triumphant smile as she terminated the connection. Turning back to Paul, she explained the sit. Mr. Ryan. Mr. Baker, Supervisor Voren has authorized the additional scans. If you'll follow me. Paul nodded, swinging his legs off the bio bed. Lead the way. I'm curious to see what you find. Never been one for standing still anyway. He followed Rhea to a larger scanning bay, his expression a mix of curiosity and quiet observation. The advanced scans revealed a surprising truth. Paul's dual hearts weren't a burden, they were an asset. The enhanced cardiovascular function provided him with increased stamina, faster recovery times, and a resilience that bordered on superhuman. His blood oxygen levels were off the charts. Rhea meticulously logged the anomaly in the Zephyr station's medical database, marking it as unexplained physiological adaptation, and requesting further investigation by the Xenobiology Division. She attached all the scan data and her own detailed analysis, hoping to pique the interest of researchers specializing in unusual alien anatomies. Unbeknownst to Rhea, deep within the labyrinthine corridors of the Zephyr station, news of Paul Baker's condition had already reached the ears of OmniCorp executives. A breach in the station's supposedly secure network had exposed the medical data, sending ripples of excitement through the corporation's clandestine research division. As Rhea reviewed the scan results one last time, a nagging feeling persisted. This discovery was significant, far more than a simple MRAL curiosity. Mr. Baker, she said, her voice thoughtful, I think we need to run even more specialized tests to see if there are any other effects of this anomaly. Rhea cleared Paul for flight, issuing a standard medical certificate with a handwritten addendum. Subject requires follow-up examinations upon return of the Stardust Drifter. Further investigation recommended. As Paul turned to leave, Rhea couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Rhea's fingers danced across the console, initiating a Level 3 access request to Zephyr Station's restricted medical database. The request pinged across the network, the loading icon spinning in the corner of her screen. She needed to see if there were any precedents, any records of similar physiological anomalies. A moment later, a holographic image materialized above her desk, a stern-faced Blargan administrator with skin like polished obsidian. Nurse Rhea, the administrator's voice boomed, echoing in the small office. Your request for access to restricted medical data has been denied. Security protocols are in place for a reason. You have not provided sufficient justification. Rhea's eyes hardened. Administrator Gorak, with all due respect, the anomaly I discovered during a routine examination warrants further investigation. I believe there may be a precedent within the restricted files. Precedent or not, Nurse Rhea, the regulations are clear. Unless you can provide concrete evidence of a station-wide threat, your request will remain denied. The administrator's image flickered and disappeared. Rhea exhaled slowly, resisting the urge to slam her fist on the desk. She activated her personal comm, the screen resolving into the familiar face of her elder sister, a prominent surgeon on Talax Prime. Sister, I need a favor. A tense video call later, leveraging familial obligations and a carefully worded explanation of the unusual case she was working on, Rhea managed to secure a compromise. Limited access to anonymized data only and under strict surveillance. Hours blurred as Rhea sifted through countless entries, each one heavily redacted, each one a frustrating dead end. Vague references to physiological anomalies and genetic potential related to deep space exploration missions, but nothing that directly matched Paul's unique condition. The station's antiquated database protocols made searching for connections feel like sifting sand. Then, she found it. A single entry, buried deep within a forgotten subsection, referencing the Stardust Drifter's original mission, a survey expedition to an uncharted sector. The entry noted the vessel's disappearance and the subsequent closure of the mission. While reviewing the data logs associated with that entry, Rhea noticed something else: unusual network activity originating from OmniCorp's secure server on the station. A chill ran down her spine. OmniCorp had no legitimate reason to be accessing those files. Her Talaxian analytical skills kicked into high gear. She initiated a trace route, her fingers flying across the keyboard, lines of code scrolling across the screen in a dizzying blur. The data flow led directly to OmniCorp's internal monitoring system. They were watching her investigation into Paul Baker. Rhea immediately reported the network intrusion to station security. The response was lukewarm at best. Nurse Rhea, OmniCorp is a valued partner of Zephyr Station, a board security officer droned. I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. We can't afford to disrupt their operations based on unsubstantiated claims. Frustration gnawed at her. OmniCorp's influence clearly extended further than she had imagined. The next day, Paul returned for his follow-up examination. He seemed more subdued than before, his usual dry wit replaced by a quiet apprehension. "So," he said, settling onto the examination table, "what's next? Are you going to hook me up to the station's central power grid?" Rhea managed a weak smile. "I understand your concern, Paul. The previous scans were invasive, but I need to run a few more tests to fully understand the anomaly. I assure you I'm acting in your best interest." As she initiated the examination sequence, Rhea discreetly bypassed the standard protocols, attempting to run a full genetic analysis without official authorization. The scanner hummed, its internal diagnostics whirring. Suddenly, the machine locked down. Alarms blared, red lights flashed, and a stark warning message filled the display. "Unauthorized procedure detected. System lockdown initiated." Rhea's heart pounded in her chest. The examination room doors hissed open and two uniformed station security officers strode in, their faces grim. "Nurse Rhea," the lead officer barked. "Explain yourself. What unauthorized procedures were you attempting to perform?" Before Rhea could answer, two more figures entered the room. They were clad in the sleek black uniforms of OmniCorp security operatives, their faces hard and unyielding. "Wemmer, here to take custody of Mr. Baker," the lead operative stated, his voice cold and authoritative. "We have been authorized to conduct a full medical evaluation due to potential health risks to Zephyr Station." Rhea stood her ground, her eyes blazing MRH defiance. "I refuse to release Mr. Baker. He is under my care, and I am conducting a legitimate medical investigation. You have no authority to interfere." "This is a matter of station-wide security," the Mr. RP operative countered, stepping closer. "Mr. Baker's condition poses a potential threat. We need to ensure the safety of everyone on board." A tense standoff ensued. Rhea, determined to protect Paul and uncover the truth. Station security, caught in the middle, unsure of whose orders to follow. And OmniCorp operatives, their intentions clear, their eyes fixed on Paul, who sat on the examination table, caught in the crossfire. Dismay. The guards, clad in Zephyr Station blue, didn't even meet her gaze. They simply followed the crisp, authoritative commands barked by the OmniCorp security detail, their black armor gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. "This is outrageous." Rhea's voice echoed in the sterile corridor. "You can't just hand over a patient to a private corporation. He has rights." The OmniCorp officer, a man with a shaved head and eyes like polished obsidian, didn't break stride. "OmniCorp has the proper authorization, Nurse Rhea. Please do not interfere." Rhea pressed, her Talaxian logic circuits firing in overdrive. "Authorization based on what? What charges are you levying? What evidence do you have?" He stopped then, his gaze piercing. That information is above your clearance, nurse. Stand down. As they moved Paul past her, Rhea saw a flicker in his eyes, a subtle tightening of his jaw. His hands were cuffed, but he rotated his left wrist just so, tapping out a sequence on a nearby access panel with his knuckles. 3 short taps, a pause, then 2 long. It was almost imperceptible, easily missed. Rhea's mind raced. It was a maintenance override code, one she'd seen him use near the environmental control systems during her first physical. He'd casually mentioned his engineering background, how he knew the Zephyr Station schematics better than the architects. Transport. He suspected they were taking him off station. Ignoring the Omni-Corp officer's warning glare, Rhea turned and sprinted back towards the medical bay, her white coat billowing behind her. Protocol be damned. She bypassed the security terminal with a swift series of commands, her fingers flying across the interface. The station's surveillance network flickered to life on the screen. Confirmed. Paul was being escorted towards Transport Dock Gamma, the express launch bay used for corporate shuttles. A sleek, black Omni-Corp vessel was already prepped for departure. Rhea clenched her jaw. She needed help. And she knew just who to ask. Eva Rostova, a human security officer with a perpetual look of weary cynicism, was usually stationed near the main security hub. Rhea found her leaning against a console, idly watching the monitors. "Eva, I need your help," Rhea said, her voice tight with urgency. Eva raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Nurse Rhea, what's got you so worked up?" "Omni-Corp is taking Paul Baker off station. I think they intend to experiment on him." Eva scoffed. "Omni-Corp experiment sounds about right, but what's that to you? I thought Talaxians were all about logic, not feelings." "This isn't about feelings," Rhea insisted, though a blush crept up her neck. "It's about ethics, and Paul's rights as a patient. They have no legal basis to detain him." Eva hesitated. "Look, Rhea, I'm just a security officer. I can't go up against Omni-Corp. They practically own the station." Rhea met her gaze, her own unwavering. "But you can look the other way, can't you? Just long enough for me to reach him." A flicker of something, perhaps guilt, perhaps a long-dormant sense of justice, crossed Eva's face. "All right," she sighed. "I can reroute you through the maintenance tunnels, but if we get caught—" "I understand the risks," Rhea said, her heart pounding. Eva swiftly typed in a series of commands overriding access restrictions. "Go, Level 3, Section 7. That'll put you close to Dock Gamma." And Rhea, "Yes. Be careful, Omni-Corp plays rough." Rhea nodded and plunged into the dimly lit corridor, the metallic tang of coolant and ozone filling her nostrils. Eva's rerouting had taken her deep into the station's underbelly, a labyrinth of pipes, conduits, and forgotten machinery. She could hear the low hum of the station's power generators and the hiss of escaping steam. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging the tunnel into near darkness. Emergency lights sputtered to life, casting long, distorted shadows. The hum of the generators stuttered, then ceased altogether. Sabotage. "Paul." Rhea pressed on, her pace quickening. She burst out of the maintenance tunnel into a chaotic scene near Dock Gamma. Emergency alarms blared. Sparks flew from a damaged power conduit. Omni-Corp security officers were shouting orders, their black armor illuminated by the flickering emergency lights. In the midst of the confusion, Rhea spotted Paul. He was partially obscured by a cloud of smoke, wrestling with his guards. Eva was there too, trying to cause a diversion. "Paul!" Rhea shouted, dodging a falling cable. He saw her, his eyes widening in relief. With a surge of strength, he ripped free from the guard's grasp and sprinted towards her. "Rhea, get out of here!" He yelled over the din. "It's not safe." "Not without you," she replied, grabbing his hand. Together, they plunged back into the maintenance tunnels, leaving Eva to fend for herself against the Omni-Corp security forces. The chase was on. They navigated the twisting corridors with a desperate urgency, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. Paul moved with an almost uncanny agility, dodging low-hanging pipes and leaping over obstacles with ease. At one point, A security laser grid blocked their path. Without hesitation, Paul grabbed a discarded piece of metal and deflected the beams, creating a momentary gap for them to slip through. Rhea, struggling to keep pace, noticed something was off. Paul's breathing was ragged, but his movements were impossibly fast, almost blurring. His pulse, she realized, was far higher than normal, even for someone in a high-stress situation. She risked a glance at her wrist-mounted biomonitor. Impossible. His heart rate was spiking to over 200 beats per minute, his adrenaline levels through the roof. It was far beyond human parameters. They reached a dead end, a sealed blast door. "Damn it," Paul cursed, banging his hand against the metal. "Wait," Rhea said, noticing a small access panel near the floor. "I think I can override the lock." She knelt down and began to work on the panel, her fingers flying across the controls. But before she could finish, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed in the corridor. "They're coming," Paul yelled. He grabbed the blast door handle and pulled. The metal groaned, but the door remained sealed. He pulled again, harder, his muscles straining. Still nothing. Then, with a primal roar, he yanked with all his might. The blast door buckled and tore from its hinges, leaving a gaping hole in the wall. Rhea stared at him in disbelief. No human could possess that kind of strength. They stumbled through the opening into what appeared to be an abandoned hydroponics lab. The air was thick with the scent of decaying vegetation and stagnant water. Rows of empty plant beds stretched into the darkness, illuminated by the flickering emergency lights. They were alone for now. "What was that?" Rhea asked, her voice trembling. "How did you do that?" Paul leaned against a wall, panting heavily. I don't know, adrenaline, I guess." "Adrenaline doesn't tear through reinforced steel," Rhea countered, her Talaxian logic refusing to accept such a simplistic explanation. Paul sighed. "Look, Rhea, I've always been healthier than most people. I can stay awake for days, heal quickly. Deep space travel always tires me out more than other people, though. I just thought I was lucky." Suddenly, the lights flickered again, then stabilized. A voice boomed over the lab's intercom. "Paul Baker, Rhea, and Eva Rostova. This is Thorn OmniCorp Executive Security. You are surrounded. Resistance is futile. Surrender now and we guarantee your safety." Rhea and Paul exchanged a look of dogged perseverance. They were trapped. The hydroponics lab doors hissed open, revealing Thorn and a squad of heavily armed OmniCorp security officers. Thorn stepped forward, a cold smile playing on his lips. "Very foolish of you to resist," Thorn said, his voice dripping with condescension. "But I admire your spirit, Nurse Rhea, which is why I'm offering you a position. Join us and you can be a part of something truly groundbreaking. We understand Paul's unique physiology. Think of the possibilities." He gestured towards Paul. With his abilities, he could be a weapon, a tool, or the key to unlocking a new era of human enhancement. All you have to do is cooperate. Eva, who had somehow managed to slip through the security cordon, stepped forward, placing herself between Thorn and Rhea and Paul. "Go to hell, Thorn," she spat. Thorn sighed dramatically. "Such a waste. I always admired your loyalty, Rostova. Pity it's misplaced." He nodded to his guards. "Take them." Before the guards could react, Eva lunged forward, firing a volley of shots from her sidearm. The OmniCorp security officers returned fire and the hydroponics lab erupted in a chaotic firefight. "Go, now," Eva screamed, drawing the guards' attention to herself. Rhea hesitated, her heart pounding with guilt and fear. "But Eva." "I'll be fine," Eva insisted, firing another shot. "Just get out of here. Tell them what OmniCorp is doing." Tears streamed down Rhea's face as she grabbed Paul's hand and pulled him towards a dark corner of the lab. They found a narrow ventilation shaft hidden behind a row of empty plant beds. Without a word, they squeezed inside, leaving Eva to face the OmniCorp forces alone. As they crawled through the cramped, dusty shaft, Rhea could still hear the sounds of gunfire and shouting behind them. Eva's sacrifice had bought them time, but they were now fugitives, hunted by a powerful corporation with seemingly unlimited resources. The station was on full alert. There was nowhere left to run. The metallic tang of stale air filled Rhea's nostrils as they squeezed through the narrow ventilation shaft, Paul leading the way. The duct vibrated with the low hum of unseen machinery, a constant thrum against their skin. "Station security is sealing off Sector Gamma," Paul muttered, his voice tight against the metal. "We need to move. Now." Ahead, a maintenance grate offered a glimpse of a brightly lit corridor. Faint voices drifted up, distorted by the ventilation system. They pressed closer, straining to hear. "Complete lockdown. No one in or out. OmniCorp is calling the shots." Rhea's stomach clenched. OmniCorp's reach extended further than she'd imagined. Their options were vanishing with each passing moment. A sudden grinding noise echoed from behind. Paul winced, clutching his head. "My enhanced hearing. It's making it worse." He braced himself against the duct wall, his nucleus tightening. Then, as he shifted, his elbow struck a ventilation fan, sending a shower of sparks and a deafening screech through the shaft. "Paul," Rhea hissed. "Sorry," he gasped, his face pale. "Didn't mean to." Powers are a little unreliable. The noise would have alerted anyone nearby. They had to move, and fast. "The marketplace," Rhea said, her mind racing. "Sector Delta, crowded. Less monitored, it's our best chance for cover." As they crawled onward, Rhea's mind flashed back. Eva strapped to a chair, her face bruised but defiant. An OmniCorp interrogator leaned in, his voice a low growl. "Where are they, Officer Rostova? Cooperate, and this can all be over quickly." Eva spat in his face. The memory fueled Rhea's grit. They couldn't let Eva down. Reaching the marketplace access point, they dropped silently onto a narrow service walkway. The air instantly thickened with the smells of exotic spices, alien pheromones, and unidentifiable fried foods. A cacophony of languages assaulted their ears, a dizzying blend of clicks, whistles, and guttural pronouncements. Thorne's voice, amplified and distorted, boomed from overhead speakers. "Dangerous biohazard. Paul Baker. Talaxian trader Rhea. Quarantine immediately. Report any sightings." Screens flickered to life throughout the marketplace, displaying Paul's image gaunt, wild-eyed alongside Rhea's Talaxian features. Faces turned, eyes narrowed. Whispers snaked through the crowd, permeated with fear and suspicion. Rhea felt a chill crawl down her spine. They were pariahs now, hunted and reviled. As they navigated the throng, Paul stumbled, his hand flying to his chest. A jolt of energy surged through him, an uncontrolled burst that sent a ripple through the nearby stalls. Lights flickered, display screens died, and the air crackled with ozone. What was that? A gruff voice shouted. Panic erupted. People screamed and shoved, desperate to escape the perceived threat. Rhea grabbed Paul's arm, pulling him towards a stall overflowing with brightly colored fabrics. "We need to blend in," she said, her voice urgent. She scanned the stall, her eyes landing on a bolt of shimmering, iridescent cloth favored by the nomadic Varkonians. "Distraction weave," she muttered, tearing off a large section. "Keeps the sun out of their many eyes and hides their forms from local predators." With practiced hands, she draped the fabric over Paul, fashioning a makeshift cloak and head covering. "Trust me," she said, her eyes pleading. As they moved deeper into the marketplace, a Talaxian merchant, his antennae twitching nervously, stepped into their path. "Rhea," he said, his voice a low hiss. "What's going on? The station is in chaos." "I need your help," Rhea said, her voice guarded. "I can offer you safe passage," the merchant said, his gaze darting nervously around. "But you must come with me, now." His offer felt too convenient, too easy. Rhea hesitated, her instincts screaming a warning. Suddenly, Paul groaned, his knees buckling. He collapsed onto the crowded thoroughfare, his body racked with tremors. "Paul!" Rhea cried, kneeling beside him. His skin was burning, his breathing shallow and ragged. He needed immediate medical attention. "Medicine," he gasped, his voice barely audible. "The blue ampules." Ria's eyes darted around, searching for a medical kiosk. Spotting one across the square, she shoved her way through the throng, ignoring the suspicious glances and muttered curses. Reaching the kiosk, she grabbed a handful of blue ampoules, shoving them into her pocket without paying. As she turned to leave, she noticed a small, almost hidden price tag on one of the ampoules. OmniCorp Experimental Subject 47. Her blood ran cold. What had she just given Paul? "I can help you," the Talaxian merchant said, appearing at her side. "I know a secluded alcove where you can treat your friend." Ria, desperate, followed him through a maze of narrow alleyways, her mind racing. The alcove was small and dimly lit, but offered a semblance of privacy. As she prepared the injection, the merchant's face hardened. "I'm sorry, Ria," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, "but I can't risk my own safety. OmniCorp is offering a substantial reward." He reached for his comm device. Before he could activate it, Paul, despite his weakened state, moved with lightning speed. He disarmed the merchant, his hand a blur, sending the comm device skittering across the floor. "Don't," Paul rasped, his voice strained. "Make me." The commotion had attracted attention. Heavy footsteps echoed in the alleyway. Station security. "They're here." The merchant shrieked. Cornered, Ria and Paul braced themselves for a fight. But then a figure emerged from the shadows, a sanitation worker, his face obscured by a grime-streaked visor. He raised his hand, activating a sonic emitter that shattered the nearby lights, plunging the alleyway into darkness. "Go," he shouted, his voice distorted by the emitter. "I'll hold them off." Taking advantage of the chaos, Ria and Paul fled, their hearts pounding. They needed to escape the marketplace to find a way off the station. They reached a restricted cargo bay, the air thick with the smell of fuel and ozone. A small transport ship sat waiting, its engines humming softly. A beacon of hope in the face of despair. "We can get out of here," Paul said, his voice regaining some strength. "But I need to bypass the security protocols. It won't be easy." He stumbled towards the ship's control panel, his fingers flying across the keys with surprising dexterity. But his movements were jerky, his breaths labored. The effort was clearly taking its toll. As the launch sequence neared completion, the cargo bay's comm system crackled to life. Thorne's voice, cold and menacing, filled the air. "Baker, Ria," he said, "your little game is over. We have Officer Rostova in custody. Surrender now or she will suffer the consequences." "We can't just hand her over," Paul growled, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "Not after everything." Ria bit her lip, her Talaxian logic warring with her growing affection for the human. "But what choice do we have, Paul? Thorne has the resources to hunt us down. Eva's sacrifice could buy us time." "Time for what?" Paul countered, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "Time to become OmniCorp's lab rats. Eva doesn't deserve that." They stood in the cramped maintenance tunnel, the only light source casting long, distorted shadows on the grimy walls. The air hung thick with the smell of lubricant and ozone. Ria closed her eyes, picturing Eva's face, the fear mingled with defiance. "All right," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We try to rescue her. We." Paul raised an eyebrow, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "We," Ria confirmed, meeting his gaze. "But we need a plan. A good one." They huddled together, their minds racing. Paul, drawing on his knowledge of Zephyr Station's infrastructure, suggested infiltrating the security headquarters. Ria, with her medical expertise, knew the layout of the complex, including the restricted areas. "The surveillance systems are state-of-the-art," Ria said, her brow furrowed. "But if we can disable the central hub, we might have a chance." "I can overload the system," Paul said, a spark of commitment in his voice. "But it'll be risky. My abilities are becoming less predictable." The rescue operation commenced under the cover of darkness. They navigated the labyrinthine corridors, their footsteps muffled by the station's hum. Paul, using his internal electrical pulses, disabled security cameras and motion sensors, creating blind spots in their path. Ria guided them through the medical wing, bypassing laser grids and pressure plates. They reached the security headquarters undetected, but Thorn was waiting. "I knew you'd come," Thorn said, his voice echoing through the room. "I admire your loyalty, but it's misplaced." Eva was restrained, her eyes wide with fear. Omnicorp security forces surrounded them, weapons trained. A brief but intense firefight erupted. Paul, fueled by adrenaline, fought with a ferocity that surprised even Rhea. He disarmed and incapacitated several guards, creating an opening for Rhea to free Eva. But as soon as Eva was freed, the trio was immediately surrounded. The room seemed to shrink, the metallic tang of blood filling the air. Suddenly, Paul's body convulsed. A surge of energy erupted from him, overloading the security HQ systems. Lights flickered and died, alarms blared, and the room plunged into chaos. The Omnicorp soldiers stumbled, disoriented by the sudden disruption. "Now!" Rhea yelled, grabbing Eva's hand. They fled through the darkened corridors, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. They reached the transport ship, their initial escape route, only to find it heavily damaged, sparking, and inoperable. "Damn it," Paul cursed, kicking a piece of twisted metal. "That's it then, we're trapped." Eva, however, remained surprisingly calm. "There's another way," she said, her voice steady. "A hidden escape pod. I know the location." She led them through a series of secret passages, concealed behind maintenance panels and storage compartments. They reached a small, unassuming door. Inside, a single escape pod awaited. They crammed into the pod, the cramped space offering little comfort. Rhea initiated the launch sequence. The pod shuddered, then shot out into the blackness of space, leaving Zephyr Station behind. But their relief was short-lived. An Omnicorp pursuit ship intercepted them, firing a disabling blast that crippled the escape pod. Warning lights flashed and the life support systems began to fail. "We're stranded," Rhea said, her voice infused with despair. Aboard the crippled escape pod, supplies dwindled rapidly. Paul's condition worsened. His skin was clammy, his breathing shallow. "I don't have much time," he said, his voice weak. "The virus, it's accelerating." Rhea refused to give up. She assessed the damage to the pod, her mind racing, and then she had an idea, one born of desperation and ingenuity. "We can create a bioelectrical generator," she said, her eyes shining with feverish purpose. "Use our bodies as a power source." Paul looked at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and admiration. "You're crazy," he said, but there was a hint of a smile on his lips. Working together, they jury-rigged a system using scavenged components and their own bioenergy. It was a grueling process, pushing their bodies to the limit, but they managed to generate a minimal amount of power. "It's not much," Rhea said, her voice hoarse, "but it's enough to transmit a distress signal." They sent out a faint, desperate plea for help, knowing that it was a long shot. As they waited, Eva revealed a secret she had been keeping. I wasn't always on the right side," she confessed, her voice filled with shame. "I was involved in some of Omnicorp's illicit activities, that's why they want me." The revelation added a new layer of complexity to the situation. Was Eva truly on their side, or was she still working for Omnicorp? Suddenly, a klaxon blared. Thorn's voice crackled over the comm system. "This is Thorn. We know you're in there. Surrender now, and I promise you a quick death." Thorn was coming. Rhea and Paul knew they had to prepare for a last stand. They used their remaining resources to set traps and defenses within the confined space of the escape pod. They sharpened pieces of broken metal into makeshift weapons. They rigged electrical wires to deliver shocks to anyone who tried to enter. Thorn and his team breached the escape pod. A tense, brutal confrontation ensued. The confined space amplified the violence, every blow echoing with bone-jarring force. Despite his weakened condition, Paul unleashed a final surge of energy, disrupting Thorn's armor and creating an opening for Rhea and Eva to subdue Thorn's team. Just when all hope seemed lost, a ship appeared on the interface. A passing vessel, responding to their weak distress signal. Salvation had arrived. But as the ship's docking clamps engaged, a gruff voice came over the comms. "Welcome aboard, little birds. We're the Marauder, and you're about to find out what it really means to be lost in space." The screen flickered, revealing the faces of heavily armed pirates, their eyes glinting with malice. Their smiles were anything but welcoming. The pirate captain, a woman named Zara with a cybernetic eye that glinted in the dim light of the bridge, clasped Rhea's hand with surprising strength. "Doctor, we owe you a debt. Pulling us from that scrap heap was fortunate." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the Zephyr Station wreckage visible on the main view screen. "But be warned, this rescue comes with a caveat. The Stardust Drifter is a free trader, not a hospital ship. We're not equipped for long-term medical care." Zara leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I can offer you safe passage to Nar Shaddaa, a less regulated station, but in exchange, you'll need to use your skills. One of my crew took a plasma blast to the gut during the escape. He needs your attention, and fast." Rhea hesitated, glancing at Paul, who was slumped against a bulkhead, his face pale and clammy. His breathing was shallow, punctuated by ragged gasps. Eva stood guard, her expression grim. "And if I refuse?" Rhea asked, her voice tight. Zara's cybernetic eye whirred softly. "Then I'm afraid you'll be sharing the same fate as that station, adrift and forgotten." "My crew comes first." Rhea sighed. She had no choice. "Fine, I'll treat your crewmen, but I need proper equipment." Zara smirked, a flash of metal teeth in the dim light. "You work with what you got, Doctor. This ain't the Zephyr Station." She gestured towards a grimy corridor. "Med Bay's that way. Don't expect miracles." The Med Bay was little more than a cramped storage compartment converted into a makeshift operating room. The air reeked of stale synth ale and unwashed bodies. A single flickering light panel cast long, distorted shadows across the room. The injured pirate, a hulking brute with crude tattoos etched across his arms, lay unconscious on a stained surgical table. His abdomen was a charred mess, held together by makeshift bandages soaked in blood. Rhea grimaced. The medical supplies were woefully inadequate: rusty surgical tools, a half-empty bottle of antiseptic, and a patched-up medi-scanner that looked older than she was. "This is suboptimal," she muttered, grabbing a pair of gloves. She ran the scanner over the pirate's wound, and a holographic display flickered to life, showing the extent of the damage. Internal bleeding, ruptured organs, and severe tissue damage. He needs immediate surgery and a blood transfusion. As she prepped the pirate for surgery, Rhea noticed something odd. Tucked away in a shadowed corner of the Med Bay, behind a stack of dented storage crates, was a small, locked compartment. Curiosity piqued. She pried it open with a surgical tool. Inside, nestled in a padded case, was a sleek, advanced piece of OmniCorp technology, a neural interface device. Her blood ran cold. What was OmniCorp tech doing on a pirate ship? Suddenly, a wave of energy pulsed through the ship, causing the lights to flicker violently. The medi-scanner sputtered and died. Paul groaned, clutching his chest. "Something's happening," he gasped, his voice strained. Eva rushed into the Med Bay, her face etched with concern. "His condition is worsening rapidly. He's emitting some kind of energy field, and it's messing with the ship systems." "That's not all," Rhea said, holding up the OmniCorp device. "I found this hidden in the Med Bay." Eva's eyes widened. "That's a restricted neural interface, used for sensitive operations. Where did you find that?" "Hidden in a compartment. What are pirates doing with OmniCorp tech?" Eva's lips thinned. "Those pirates aren't just trading spice and scrap metal. They're running black market tech for a syndicate. That OmniCorp device is worth a fortune." A gruff voice boomed from the doorway. Zara stood there, her cybernetic eye narrowed. "What's going on here?" "We found your little secret compartment, Captain," Eva said, her voice filled with accusation. "OmniCorp tech. You're dealing with them, aren't you?" Zara hesitated, her expression unreadable. "I trade with a lot of people. Omnicorp included, but I don't know anything about their sensitive operations, as you call them. I buy and sell, that's it. I swear if I thought they were doing anything unethical, I'd cut ties immediately. Before anyone could respond, the ship lurched violently. Alarms blared throughout the vessel. "We're under attack." A voice crackled over the comm system. "Omnicorp ships inbound." Zara swore under her breath. "They found us. Thorn must really want whatever we're carrying." She whirled around, her hand reaching for a blaster pistol strapped to her thigh. "All right, ladies, gentlemen, looks like we got company. Doctor, keep him alive." "Eva, to the bridge, you know more about their systems than anyone else. Let's show these corporate vultures what happens when they mess with the Stardust Drifter." As Zara barked orders, Omnicorp fighters swarmed the pirate ship, lasers streaking across the void. Explosions rocked the vessel, shaking it violently. The battle had begun. Inside the med bay, chaos reigned. Paul writhed on the floor, his body convulsing. His skin glowed with an eerie light and his eyes flickered with uncontrolled energy. Rhea knelt beside him, desperately trying to stabilize him, but his energy surges were growing stronger, disrupting her medical equipment and sending sparks flying. The air crackled with static electricity. "Paul, you need to calm down." Rhea shouted over the din of battle, grabbing his face and forcing him to look at her. "Control your powers, you're going to destroy the ship." Eva's voice came over the comm system, frantic. "Zara, Thorn's flagship is locking onto our shields. They're bypassing our security protocols. They're going to board us." Zara's reply was grim. "Brace for impact. We're not going down without a fight." Suddenly, Paul's body arched violently. A massive surge of energy erupted from him, knocking Rhea backwards. The lights in the med bay exploded, plunging the room into darkness. A high-pitched whine filled the air, followed by a series of loud cracks as the ship's metal groaned under the strain. "I can't control it," Paul gasped, his voice a tortured whisper. "It's too much." Rhea scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to do something, and fast. Paul's powers were spiraling out of control, threatening to tear the ship apart. Eva's voice, strained and desperate, crackled over the comm. "I've managed to reroute power to the forward shields, but it's only temporary. They're boarding us now. We've got incoming." Eva, using her knowledge of Omnicorp systems, managed to overload Thorn's targeting computer for a precious few seconds, giving the Stardust Drifter a brief respite. "They're temporarily blind, but it won't last," she said over the comms, her voice tight with urgency. "Get ready for a fight." The boarding alarm blared, a piercing screech that echoed through the ship. The sounds of laser fire and explosions grew louder as Thorn's forces breached the hull. The pirates, armed with a motley collection of weapons, scrambled to defend their ship. Inside the cramped corridors, a brutal firefight erupted. Lasers ripped through the air, ricocheting off the metal walls. Pirates screamed as they were cut down by Omnicorp soldiers in gleaming black armor. The air filled with the acrid smell of burnt metal and ozone. As the battle raged, Paul, still struggling to control his powers, stumbled through the darkened corridors. Thorn, a towering figure in black armor, his face obscured by a helmet, appeared before him, his eyes glowing red. "Baker," he growled, his voice distorted by a vocoder. "You're coming with me." Paul, overwhelmed by the virus's effects and Thorn's relentless attacks, felt his control slipping away. He tried to focus, to contain the energy surging through his body, but it was too much. In a desperate attempt to escape, he unleashed a burst of raw power. The energy surge was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It ripped through the ship, tearing through metal and flesh alike. And in that instant, reality seemed to warp and twist. When the light subsided, Paul found himself standing in a completely different part of the ship, a remote storage bay that had been sealed off long ago. Thorn was there too, his armor scorched and smoking, his eyes blazing with fury. Rhea and Eva, hearing the explosion, raced towards the source of the disturbance. Their hearts pounded in their chests. They knew that if Paul lost control, it could mean the end for everyone. Paul and Thorn faced each other alone. "You can't control it, can you?" Thorn sneered. "You're a danger to yourself and everyone around you. Omnicorp can help you. We can control your power." "I'll never let you use me," Paul snarled, his voice strained. Thorn lunged, swinging a power sword that crackled with energy. Paul dodged, barely avoiding the deadly blade. He tried to summon his powers, but the virus was interfering, making his movements erratic and unpredictable. As Thorn pressed his attack, Paul felt his control slipping away completely. He screamed in agony, and a massive energy blast erupted from his body. The blast tore through the ship, ripping a gaping hole in the hull. The storage bay was instantly depressurized, sucking everything inside out into the cold vacuum of space. Paul and Thorn were caught in the vortex, spinning uncontrollably. Rhea and Eva arrived just in time to witness the explosion. Their faces were etched with horror as they saw Paul and Thorn ejected into the void, their fates uncertain. The Stardust Drifter, crippled and burning, limped through space, its crew fighting for survival against overwhelming odds. The enraged pirates, now facing certain death, turned their wrath on Rhea and Eva, blaming them for the disaster. "Seal the breach. Life support, emergency protocols now." Rhea's voice cracked with urgency, overriding the klaxons blaring through the ravaged ship. Sparks showered from severed conduits as she wrestled with a damaged comm panel, her Talaxian biology struggling to compensate for the sudden vacuum exposure. Zara, teeth bared in a snarl that revealed more predatory intent than fury, surveyed the gaping hole in her ship. "Damn it all, that little human. Seal it, you worthless slugs, and get me a damage report." Her gaze snapped back to Rhea. "He'd better be worth more than this heap of junk. Find him, nurse. He owes me a ship." Eva, ever the pragmatist, was already barking orders at the engineering crew. "Maneuvering thrusters are offline on this side. Salvage drone prep for immediate launch. We'll use its sensors to locate them." She turned to Rhea, her face grim. "It's a long shot, but it's all we've got." Rhea, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate hope, grabbed a tattered emergency suit from a nearby locker. It was barely spaceworthy, patched with sealant and missing several pressure regulators. "It'll have to do," she muttered, shoving a medical kit into a makeshift pouch. "Eva, can you rig up a temporary comm link?" A gruff voice cut through the chaos. "Hold it right there." A hulking pirate, the first mate recognizable by the crude cybernetic eye glinting in the dim light, stepped forward, blocking their path. "Zara's lost her mind, risking our necks for some lab rat. He's more trouble than he's worth. I say we cut our losses and hand him over to Omnicorp when they arrive." Zara's roar echoed through the corridor. "You dare question me, Krill?" Eva stepped between them, her hand resting on the energy pistol at her hip. "This isn't the time for a power struggle. We need to find them now." Rhea, ignoring the brewing conflict, activated the comm link Eva had jury-rigged. "Drone team, this is Nurse Rhea. Prepare for launch. Scan for life signs, prioritize human physiology. Time is critical." With a lurch, the salvage drone detached from the ship, its weak thrusters struggling to navigate the swirling debris field. Rhea stared at the grainy images flickering on her wrist-mounted display, her heart pounding against her ribs. The drone's sensor pinged. "Life sign detected. Low oxygen, severe cold stress. Bearing." The coordinates appeared on the screen, pinpointing a small cluster of wreckage. "That's Thorn," Eva confirmed, studying the readings. "Unconscious but alive, clinging to a piece of the hull." Rhea's breath hitched. Thorn was a threat, a direct line to Omnicorp, but he was also dying. "Can we reach him?" "The drone can grab him," Eva said grimly. "But it'll take time." Time we don't have if Paul's still out there. Rhea's mind raced. Paul's erratic physiology, the virus, the potential he represented. But could she condemn a man to die? She hardened her dedication. Prioritize Paul. Thorn would want it that way. A difficult decision, but one she had to make. Another ping. "Life sign detected. strong energy fluctuations, severe hypothermia, bearing. Rhea's eyes locked onto the new coordinates. Paul, he's close. The drone lurched toward the signal. Rhea watched, breathless, as a figure materialized amidst the wreckage. Paul, his body encased in a thin layer of ice, energy crackling around him like a deadly halo. As the drone extended its manipulator arm, a surge of energy erupted from Paul, overloading the drone's systems. The feed cut out, leaving Rhea staring at a blank screen. "Rhea, what's going on?" Eva shouted over the comms. "The drone's down, Paul. His powers, they're out of control." Rhea knew she had to act. "I'm going out there." Eva's face was a mask of disbelief. "Are you insane? That suit won't hold for long. You'll freeze solid." "I have to try," Rhea said, her voice firm. "He needs me." Without hesitation, Eva began sealing herself into another emergency suit. "Then I'm going with you. You're going to need someone to watch your back." As Eva pressurized her suit, a commotion erupted behind them. Krill and his faction had stormed the bridge, weapons drawn. "Zara's too soft. We're taking this ship to Omni Corp. Anyone who stands in our way gets spaced." Zara, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead, stood defiant, a plasma pistol clutched in her hand. "You'll have to go through me first, you spineless dogs." While the mutiny raged, Rhea and Eva launched themselves into the void, their makeshift suits offering minimal protection against the brutal cold. They propelled themselves towards Paul's last known location, their hearts pounding in unison. They reached him quickly, his body drifting silently. His skin was clammy beneath the ice, his breathing shallow and erratic. "Paul," Rhea shouted into her comm, shaking him gently. He didn't respond. Suddenly, Thorne's voice crackled over their comms. "Foolish woman, you think you can save him? He belongs to Omni Corp. His power will be ours." They turned to see Thorne, looking gaunt and half-frozen, pointing a stolen plasma pistol at them. "I won't let you ruin this." Before he could fire, Zara tackled him from behind, sending them both tumbling into the debris field. A brutal, silent struggle ensued, punctuated only by the crackle of their suits. Ignoring the fight, Rhea and Eva worked frantically to stabilize Paul, dragging him back towards the crippled drone. As they struggled, Rhea noticed something strange, a faint pattern etched into Paul's skin, a complex sequence of nucleotides glowing faintly beneath the ice. It was a message. Zara, bleeding from multiple wounds, managed to disarm Thorne, slamming his head against a jagged piece of metal. He slumped into unconsciousness. "Get him back to the ship," she gasped, clutching her side. "I can't. Much longer." Back on the ship, Zara collapsed, her injuries severe. Rhea, juggling medical duties and the escalating mutiny, felt a surge of despair. She returned to Paul, studying the genetic message she'd noticed in space. "Eva, enhance this sequence." The analysis came back quickly. "It's a map, a planetary coordinate, and a sequence, a retroviral antidote." "But what does it mean?" Rhea asked. Suddenly, Krill's voice blared over the ship's comm system. "Rhea, Eva, we have control of the ship. Hand over the human or we'll blow you all to Kingdom Come." Zara, propped against a wall, her face pale, managed a weak grin. "Looks like things just got interesting." Rhea exchanged a look with Eva. The mutiny, Paul's deteriorating condition, the hidden message. They were trapped, but not defeated. "We're not handing Paul over," Rhea said, her voice clear and resolute. "We're leaving." Rhea ducked behind a sparking conduit, the acrid smell of burnt wiring stinging her nostrils. Laser fire sizzled past, chewing chunks out of the metal plating beside her. "Eva, status." She yelled over the din of the firefight. Eva's voice crackled back through the comm, strained but steady. "Almost got the bypass working. Just need to reroute power from auxiliary life support." Zara, her face grim, materialized beside them, shoving Paul deeper into the alcove. A fresh gash bled freely on her arm. "This sector's collapsing. We need to move now." She raised her voice, her Talaxian-enhanced vocals cutting through the chaos. "Security teams, this is Commander Zara. Cease fire. You're destroying the ship." A momentary hesitation rippled through the fighting, a flicker of obedience ingrained from years of training. It was all Zara needed. "Eva, Rhea, go, I'll cover you." Eva cursed, slamming a panel shut. "Got it. Go, go, go." She grabbed Rhea's arm, pulling her toward the emergency escape pod bay, dragging a stumbling Paul behind them. The bay doors hissed open to reveal a scene of near-total destruction. One pod was a twisted wreck, another engulfed in flames. The third, miraculously, was intact, though sparks flew from a damaged control panel. Eva scrambled inside, tools already in hand. "Hyperdrives fried. Life support's marginal. We're going to be floating coffins if I can't fix this." Suddenly, a figure emerged from the smoke-filled corridor. Thorn, his uniform torn, eyes burning with manic fury. "You think you can escape? This ends here." Zara stepped in front of the escape pod, her face a mask of defiance. "Not today, Thorn, you're not touching them." Despite her injury, she stood firm, a Talaxian warrior to the last. "You're a fool, Zara," Thorn snarled, raising his weapon. "Maybe," she said, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips, "but I'm your fool." Rhea watched in horror as Zara engaged Thorn, laser fire erupting between them. "Eva, we have to help her." "We can't," Eva said grimly, her hands flying across the control panel. "If we don't get this pod running, Zara's sacrifice will be for nothing. Just get ready." With a final, desperate surge of effort, Eva slammed her fist on the activation button. The escape pod shuddered, its engines sputtering to life. The bay doors slammed shut, sealing them inside. Rhea risked one last glance at the bay, catching a glimpse of Zara going down, before the pod lurched violently forward, tearing free of the Stardust drifter. Alarms blared as the pod careened through space, narrowly avoiding a collision with a chunk of debris torn from the ship. A jolt ran through the vessel. "Hull integrity at 60%. Eva shouted, wrestling with the controls. "We took a hit. Hyperdrive's offline and I can't get it back online. Short-range jumps only if we're lucky." Rhea turned to Paul, who was slumped in his seat, his breathing ragged. His skin was flushed, and erratic pulses of energy flickered around him, causing the lights to flicker. "Paul, what's happening?" he groaned, clutching his chest. "It's getting worse, the energy. It's building up too fast." "His energy surges are becoming more frequent," Rhea said, fear tightening her voice. "If we don't do something, he'll overload the pod systems." "Got any bright ideas, Doc?" Eva asked, her voice filled with desperation. Rhea thought quickly. "There's a Talaxian technique. A controlled energy dampening field. It's risky, but it might buy us some time. But I'll need your help, Eva." Eva stared at her. "What do you need me to do?" Rhea explained the procedure. A complex manipulation of bioelectric fields that required precise timing and coordination. Eva, despite her lack of medical training, listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. As Rhea prepared the equipment, Paul's energy surges intensified, the pod vibrating violently. Eva, following Rhea's instructions, carefully adjusted the power conduits, her hands steady despite the chaos. Rhea activated the dampening field. Paul convulsed, his body arching in pain, then slowly relaxed. The energy surges subsided, the lights stabilizing. But he was pale and weak, his breathing shallow. "It worked. For now," Rhea said, wiping sweat from her brow. "But it's temporary. The effects won't last long." Suddenly, a garbled distress signal crackled through the comm system. "Mayday, mayday, derelict freighter, the Serpent's Kiss. Request assistance. Hull breach, mutated." The signal cut out, leaving only static. Eva looked at Rhea, her expression grim. "Sounds like a party, but we're not exactly in a position to be picky. The nav system shows a derelict freighter matching that description about 3 light hours from here. Could be our only chance for repairs." Rhea hesitated. "It's a risk, but we don't have many options." As if to emphasize the point, the comm system crackled again. "Unidentified vessel, this is Omni-Corp cruiser the Tyrant. You are ordered to surrender immediately. Resistance is futile." They found us, Eva said, her voice tight. Damn it, we're out of time. Rhea made her decision. Eva, plot a course for the Serpent's Kiss. We're going to need all the luck we can get. The escape pod limped through space, drawn toward the derelict freighter like a moth to a flickering flame. As they approached, the freighter loomed into view, a massive, decaying hulk, its hull scarred and breached, drifting silently against the backdrop of the stars. Looks like someone had a really bad day, Eva said grimly. They docked with the derelict, the airlock hissing open to reveal a scene of utter desolation. The corridors were dark and silent, the air thick with the stench of decay. Stay close, Rhea whispered, activating her wrist-mounted scanner. Something's not right here. As they ventured deeper into the derelict, they began to hear skittering sounds, faint at first, then growing louder. Shadows danced in the periphery, and a sense of unease settled over them. Suddenly, a creature lunged from the darkness, a grotesque parody of a human, its skin stretched tight over bone, its eyes glowing with feral hunger. It snarled, its teeth elongated into razor-sharp fangs. What the hell is that? Eva gasped, raising her makeshift weapon, a length of metal pipe she'd fashioned into a club. Mutated space scavengers, Rhea said grimly, her scanner confirming her suspicions. Remnants of the crew exposed to experimental weaponry. They're highly aggressive and extremely dangerous. The scavengers swarmed toward them, their numbers growing with each passing moment. Rhea quickly scanned one of the creatures. Their exoskeletons are weak against sonic frequencies. Eva, can you modify your weapon? Eva nodded grimly, pulling some wires from the wall and attaching them to her makeshift club. Let's see if these space zombies like a little feedback. With a roar, she charged forward, swinging the electrified pipe, and the scavengers shrieked as the electricity coursed through their bodies. Rhea and Eva fought their way through the horde, their combined skills keeping them alive. They needed to find a hyperdrive module and get out of here before OmniCorp arrived. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the engineering section. Scrambling through the debris, they located a functional hyperdrive module. Jackpot! Eva yelled. But it's going to take some serious work to get this thing compatible with our pod. As they worked, Rhea discovered a hidden compartment containing data logs. She quickly downloaded the information. The logs told a horrifying tale of a crew driven mad by a mysterious energy source on a remote planet, and the experimental weaponry they had unleashed upon themselves. Suddenly the ship shook violently. They're here, Eva yelled. OmniCorps boarded the ship. Rhea and Eva worked frantically, sweat dripping from their brows. They managed to install the repaired hyperdrive just as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Ready to go? Eva asked, her voice tight with adrenaline. Ready as we'll ever be, Rhea said, grabbing Paul's arm. They scrambled back to the escape pod, OmniCorp forces hot on their heels. Eva fired up the engines, the pod shuddering violently. Punch it! Rhea screamed. Eva initiated a short-range jump, the pod lurching into hyperspace just as the OmniCorp forces opened fire. They emerged into normal space, far enough away from the derelict to evade immediate pursuit. But the pod was damaged, Paul was weakening, and they were heading toward a remote planet with a dark and terrifying secret. The short-range jump had been rough, too rough. A high-pitched whine filled the escape pod as the life support flickered erratically, red warning lights painting the cramped interior in a disquieting strobe. Oxygen levels were plummeting. Rhea, ever the pragmatist, ran a diagnostic. Life support systems are failing. Hull breach near the jump drive housing. We're losing atmosphere. Her Talaxian calm was a stark contrast to Eva's tightly wound anxiety. Eva swore under her breath. How much time do we have? Maybe an hour at the current rate, Rhea replied, her fingers flying across the damaged console. I've located 3 emergency oxygen tanks, but they're only partially full. We'll need to ration them carefully. She retrieved the tanks, their metallic surfaces cold against her skin. Paul, who had been silent since the jump, suddenly gasped, his eyes wide and unfocused. Sweat beaded on his forehead. I see it, he stammered, his voice strained. The planet, energy, pulsing. Rhea rushed to his side, her medical instincts kicking in. Paul, what is it? What do you see? His body convulsed, a jolt of uncontrolled energy arcing from his fingertips to the metal wall of the escape pod, leaving a scorch mark. The navigation system sputtered and died, plunging the pod into darkness for a heart-stopping moment before the emergency lights flickered back on. Eva threw her hands up in exasperation. Are you kidding me? First the life support, now this. We're stranded thanks to your powers. Rhea rounded on her, her voice sharp. He can't control it, Eva, and those powers, as you call them, might be our only way out of this. Mister of what? Into what? Some backwater planet because Mr. Two Hearts has a vision. I'm not signing up for a suicide mission, Eva retorted, her voice rising. Rhea sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. We're running out of options, Eva, and I believe him. She hated how close she was coming to admitting her feelings. Eva crossed her arms, her gaze hardening. Believing isn't enough. I believed in someone once, someone with abilities. He promised he could control them. He couldn't, cost him his life and nearly mine. She paused, her voice dropping to a near whisper. He could generate electricity, saved us from a sandstorm once, thought he could fly one day, flew right into a power line. Rhea placed a hand on Eva's arm, her expression softening. I'm sorry, Eva, I didn't know. Light years away, aboard the Omnicorp flagship, a technician watched a sensor display. Escape pod trajectory confirmed. They're heading towards the uncharted planet. ETA 6 hours. Excellent, a cold voice echoed from the comms panel. Prepare the intercept team. I want that human alive. His physiology is far too valuable to waste. Back in the escape pod, Paul was still struggling, his breathing shallow and rapid. The navigation, fix it, the symbols, in the stars. Rhea examined the damaged navigation system. Wires were severed, circuits were fried, and the holographic display was shattered. It's almost completely destroyed, Paul. What symbols? What stars? He closed his eyes, focusing inward. The serpent's eye, crossed with the hunter's bow. Then, the broken key. His voice trailed off. Rhea frowned, tapping her chin in thought. Serpent's eye, crossed with the hunter's bow. It was a crude, ancient Talaxian star chart, the broken key. That had to be a reference to the planet's unique magnetic field. Using her medical scanner as a makeshift diagnostic tool, she began tracing the damaged circuits, matching them to Paul's fragmented instructions. Hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Rhea, fueled by caffeine and adrenaline, worked tirelessly to repair the navigation system, while Eva monitored the external sensors and kept a wary eye on Paul. The oxygen levels continued to drop and the air grew thick and stale. Finally, with a surge of hope, Rhea connected the last wire. The holographic display flickered, then stabilized, showing a rudimentary star chart. I think I've got it, she said, her voice hoarse. Suddenly, alarms blared as the escape pod entered a dense field of space debris, the remnants of a long-forgotten space battle. Chunks of twisted metal, shattered asteroids, and frozen fuel tanks swirled around them, posing a deadly threat to the damaged escape pod. Brace yourselves, Eva yelled, grabbing the controls. This is going to be a bumpy ride. Eva, her face grim with tenacity, expertly maneuvered the escape pod through the treacherous debris field, dodging asteroids and weaving between jagged metal fragments. The pod groaned and shuddered as it took repeated hits, sparks flying from the damaged hull. As they navigated, Paul suddenly reached out, his hand hovering over the power conduit. More power. Need more power. Rhea hesitated, then nodded. Do it, Paul, but be careful. Paul closed his eyes, focusing his energy. A surge of power coursed through the escape pod, causing the lights to flicker and the engines to whine. For a brief, exhilarating moment, the pod surged forward, outrunning a particularly large chunk of debris. Then just as quickly the power faded, leaving them drifting in the relative calm of the other side of the field. Eva let out a shaky breath. What was that?" she asked, her eyes wide with disbelief. "He amplified the ship's power," Rhea replied, equally stunned. "I don't know how he did it, but he did." Eva stared at Paul, her expression a mixture of fear and grudging respect. He's getting stronger." Just then, a coded message crackled over the comms system. The voice was distorted and garbled, but the message was clear. "Omnicorp, trap, planet, do not land." Rhea and Eva exchanged worried glances. "Who was that?" Eva asked. "And can we trust them?" "It could be Omnicorp trying to mislead us," Rhea said, her voice thoughtful. "Or it could be someone else with their own agenda." Paul groaned, clutching his head. "No, the planet, the energy, it's there. A source, life, or death." He pointed a trembling finger at a specific point on the holographic display. Rhea studied the coordinates, her brow furrowed in concentration. It was slightly off course from their original destination, but it aligned with the energy signature Paul had described. "It's a risk," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But if there's a chance it could cure him, I have to take it." "Are you sure about this, Rhea?" Eva asked, her voice filled with concern. Rhea took a deep breath, her gaze unwano ring. "No. But I'm out of other ideas." She adjusted the escape pod's trajectory, setting a new course for the unknown. As they approached the planet's atmosphere, several sleek black ships decloaked, surrounding the escape pod like vultures circling their prey. The Omnicorp insignia gleamed menacingly on their hulls. "We're trapped," Eva exclaimed, her voice filled with despair. "Not yet," Rhea said, her eyes glinting with willpower. "Eva, can you fly this thing?" "I can try," Eva replied, her hands gripping the controls. "Then hold on tight," Rhea said, "because we're about to crash land." With a surge of adrenaline, Eva slammed the throttle forward, sending the escape pod hurtling towards the planet's surface. The Omnicorp ships opened fire, energy bolts streaking past the pod as it plunged into the atmosphere. Eva, with nerves of steel, piloted the damaged escape pod through the barrage of fire, using every ounce of her skill and experience to avoid being hit. The pod bucked and swayed violently as it entered the atmosphere, the heat shield glowing red-hot. Finally, with a bone-jarring crash, the escape pod slammed into the planet's surface, tearing through the dense canopy of an alien jungle. The world spun as the pod rolled and tumbled, before finally coming to rest in a mangled heap. The escape pod was a mangled mess of durasteel and sparking wires, half buried in the planet's thick, emerald undergrowth. Steam hissed from ruptured coolant lines, painting the humid air with a temporary shroud. Rhea, ignoring the protesting ache in her shoulder, ran a diagnostic scan over Paul with her handheld device. His breathing was shallow but steady. The readings, despite the circumstances, remained stubbornly anomalous, 2 hearts still beating in perfect, impossible synchronicity. "He's stable," she announced, her voice tight with a mixture of relief and lingering disbelief. "Weak but stable. We need to get him out of this wreckage." Eva, sporting a nasty gash on her forehead, was already assessing the perimeter. "Omnicorp won't be far behind. Their drones will be sweeping this area within the hour." She pressed a blood-soaked cloth to her wound, her expression grim. "I've seen their search patterns. They're thorough." A low, whirring sound cut through the jungle's cacophony of chirps and croaks. "Drones," Rhea swore under her breath. "We need cover, now." Working with practiced efficiency, Rhea and Eva hauled Paul from the wreckage, his weight heavy in their arms. They dragged him towards a cluster of colossal, fern-draped trees, their roots forming a natural alcove. The air hung thick and heavy, scented with damp earth and the cloying sweetness of unknown blossoms. "This will have to do," Eva grunted, stripping fronds from nearby plants. "We'll weave them into a screen, make it look like a natural part of the jungle." Rhea, her Talaxian mind already calculating angles and camouflage patterns, directed Eva with precise instructions. They worked quickly, their movements a blend of desperation and practiced skill. The drones were getting closer, their whirring growing louder, accompanied by the rhythmic pulse of their scanning beams. "The coded message," Rhea said, her voice low. "Did you manage to salvage anything?" Eva nodded, pulling a damaged data pad from her belt. "I managed to grab it before we ejected, but the encryption is complex. I need specialized equipment to even begin to crack it." She tapped the screen in frustration. Without a proper comm unit, it's just gibberish. Suddenly, Paul groaned, his eyes fluttering open. "Symbols." He rasped, his voice weak. "The ruins, etched in stone." He clutched at Rhea's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "North, towards the energy." Rhea frowned, concern etched on her face. "Paul, you're feverish. It's probably the aftereffects of the crash." But his eyes were fixed, distant, seeing something she couldn't. He was sweating profusely, his skin burning to the touch. "The virus, it was accelerating." "There," Rhea said, pointing to a twisted metal structure half hidden by vines a few meters away. "That looks like a damaged communication array from one of the old survey missions. It might be our only chance." The drones were closer now, their scanning beams sweeping the area with increasing intensity. Eva cursed under her breath. "They're narrowing the search." Rhea ignored her focus solely on the communication array. It was a mess of corroded circuits and snapped cables, but she recognized the basic architecture. With a surge of willpower, she began to formulate a plan. "Eva, set up a perimeter," she ordered, her voice calm despite the rising panic. "Use whatever you can find. Traps, alarms, anything to buy us some time." Eva nodded grimly, pulling a combat knife from her boot. "Consider it done." She disappeared into the jungle, a ghost of lethal efficiency. Paul's fever spiked, his body convulsing weakly. His visions, once clear, became fragmented and distorted. He thrashed against Rhea's hold, muttering incoherently about swirling energy and ancient guardians. The symbols danced before his eyes, blurring into meaningless shapes. Rhea, her brow furrowed in concentration, began to dismantle her medical scanner, carefully extracting components. Using salvaged wires from the escape pod and her Talaxian ingenuity, she started to bypass the damaged circuits of the communication array. Sparks flew as she rerouted power, her fingers moving with a speed and precision that belied the urgency of the situation. A fragmented burst of static crackled from the array's speakers. Rhea froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She fine-tuned the frequency, filtering out the noise. "Facility, shielded, Omnicorp, keepers, seek allies." The voice, distorted and weak, faded into silence. A triumphant grin spread across Rhea's face. They had a lead, a hope, but the respite was short-lived. The unmistakable sound of snapping branches and crashing foliage shattered the silence. Omnicorp, they had found them. "Rhea, they're here." Eva's voice, sharp and urgent, echoed through the jungle. "Get out, I'll cover you." Without hesitation, Rhea grabbed Paul, hauling him to his feet. They plunged into the dense undergrowth, the sounds of gunfire and explosions erupting behind them. The jungle floor was a treacherous tangle of roots and vines, slowing their progress. They burst into a small clearing, only to find themselves face to face with a group of creatures. They were bipedal, covered in iridescent scales, with large, intelligent eyes that glowed with an inner light. They held spears crafted from polished stone, their expressions wary and defensive. Paul, fueled by a surge of adrenaline, stumbled forward. He reached out a hand, his eyes blazing with an unnatural intensity. The symbols from his vision flooded his mind, clear and vivid. He felt an overwhelming urge to share them, to show these creatures what he had seen. He closed his eyes, focusing on the images, projecting them outward with all his might. He felt a connection, a resonance, a sense of shared understanding. The creatures stared at him in stunned silence, their eyes widening in recognition. One of them, the largest of the group, lowered its spear and stepped forward cautiously. It tilted its head, studying Paul with an intense gaze. Then it spoke, its voice a series of melodic clicks and whistles that somehow resonated with Paul's mind. He understood. Chosen. The creature gestured towards the east, towards a dark and forbidding mountain range in the distance. The ruins. But the moment of connection was shattered by the roar of approaching engines. Omnicorp Wayne losing in. "We have to go," Rhea shouted, grabbing Paul's arm. The native creatures, their initial hostility replaced by a cautious acceptance, turned and fled into the jungle, beckoning Rhea and Paul to follow. They ran, their lungs burning, their muscles screaming in protest. The Omnicorp forces pursued relentlessly, using specialized tracking devices to follow them through the dense undergrowth. The jungle was alive with the sounds of their pursuit, the crackle of energy weapons, the thud of heavy boots, the relentless whir of drones. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the jungle. Rhea and Paul stumbled, momentarily disoriented. They looked back to see a cloud of smoke billowing from their previous position. "Eva!" Rhea cried, her voice filled with anguish. A moment later, a garbled message crackled over the Omnicorp comms channel, followed by a burst of static. "Eva." She had managed to disable their communication systems, buying them time. But at what cost? Rhea and Paul, driven by grief and desperation, pressed on, guided by the native creatures. They reached the edge of the ruins, a sprawling complex of ancient structures, overgrown with vines and shrouded in mist. A palpable energy emanated from within, a powerful, almost overwhelming force that resonated deep within Paul's bones. But Eva was gone. The air hung thick and heavy, a stark contrast to the thin, crisp atmosphere outside. The carved stone beneath their boots, once rough and weathered, now felt smooth, almost polished. The torches held by the native creatures cast dancing shadows across walls etched with intricate patterns, a silent testament to an engineering prowess lost to time. Paul paused, a faint tremor running through him. "This way," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the dripping of unseen water. He didn't know how he knew, but the path ahead seemed to resonate within him, a forgotten melody echoing in his bones. He moved with a newfound confidence, his hand outstretched, guiding Rhea through the maze-like structure. The creatures, hesitant, shuffled to a halt at the entrance, their guttural clicks and whistles fading into the deepening gloom. The tunnels twisted and turned, defying any logical pattern. Then, with a low rumble that vibrated through the floor, a section of wall slid silently aside, revealing a passage that hadn't been there moments before. The native creatures whimpered, fear flashing in their large, dark eyes. They clearly weren't going any further. Rhea turned back to thank them, but they were already fleeing into the night. "Well," she said, adjusting her scanner, "that's certainly unusual." The newly revealed passage opened into a vast chamber. Holographic projections flickered to life, bathing the room in an ethereal glow. Images danced in the air, swirling nebulae, vibrant ecosystems, and humanoid figures seeding life across the barren landscape. Rhea gasped, her fingers flying across her scanner, desperately trying to record and analyze the data. Then, the holograms shifted. The idyllic scenes dissolved into chaos. Armored figures clashed against monstrous creatures, energy weapons flashed, and the planet trembled under the weight of an unseen war. The projections depicted the planet's original inhabitants locked in a desperate struggle against an unknown enemy, their advanced technology pushed to its limits. Meanwhile, miles above the planet's surface, inside the Zephyr station, a console pinged insistently. On the bridge of the Stardust Drifter, a similar ping echoed. "Sir, Omnicorp is deploying deep penetration sonic scanners on the planet's surface," a crisply uniformed officer reported to Captain Eva Rostova. "They've located a large subterranean structure." Eva swore under her breath. "They're not wasting any time." She accessed the station's sensor logs. "Damn it, they're bypassing the territorial scans. Whatever they're using is masking their signature from the native creatures. Suddenly, an alarm blared. Incoming transmission encrypted on a private Omnicorp frequency, another officer announced. Eva's eyes narrowed. Patch it through, decrypt only. A raspy voice filled the bridge. Clearance granted. Initiate collapse sequence. Seal all access points. No survivors. Eva slammed her fist on the console. Those bastards. She barked orders into her comm. Get me engineering, I need a schematic of the scanner's frequencies now. And someone get me a crate of thermal detonators, extra strength. Back on the planet deeper within the ruins, Rhea marveled at the holographic projections. This is incredible, she breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. A planetary defense system designed to protect against. Before she could finish, a low hum filled the chamber. Paul swayed, his hand flying to his chest. Rhea, he gasped, his face paling, something's happening. They reached a central chamber. A colossal crystalline structure dominated the space, pulsing with a soft, inner light. The air thrummed with energy. Paul's retrovirus was reacting to the energy, and his veins began to glow faintly beneath his skin. He stumbled, his dual hearts beating erratically, a frantic rhythm against the backdrop of the humming crystal. A wave of energy pulsed from him, washing over the chamber. Suddenly, the chamber woke up. From hidden recesses in the walls, sleek metallic drones emerged, their optical sensors glowing red. They swiveled, locking onto Paul and Rhea. Warning klaxons blared, their piercing sound echoing through the ancient halls. Intruders detected, a synthesized voice announced. Initiating termination sequence. The drones opened fire. Energy blasts ripped through the air, scorching the stone around them. Rhea reacted instantly, throwing herself behind a fallen pillar, dragging Paul with her. Those aren't standard defense protocols. She shouted over the din. They're targeting us specifically. She activated her medical scanner, sweeping it across the drones. They're targeting systems. They're keyed to specific sonic frequencies. I think I can disrupt them. Paul, his face contorted in pain, struggled to focus. Sonic frequencies. I think I can do something. Despite his weakened state, he closed his eyes, concentrating. A low hum emanated from his throat, building in intensity. He opened his mouth and unleashed a focused sonic pulse, a wave of pure sound that resonated through the chamber. The drones stuttered, their movements becoming erratic. Their energy blasts went wild, striking the walls and ceiling. Now, Rhea, Paul gasped, collapsing against the pillar, his breath ragged. Rhea didn't hesitate. Using the readings from her scanner, she fired a series of precisely calibrated sonic bursts from her wrist-mounted device. The drones shuddered, their internal systems overloading. One by one, they crashed to the ground, inert. Meanwhile, back on the surface, Eva Rostova was making her own stand. She'd managed to rig a series of thermal detonators to the sonic scanner's power conduits, creating a massive diversion. The explosions had drawn the attention of Omnicorp security forces, pulling them away from the entrance to the ruins. But now, she was cornered. A heavily armed security squad advanced towards her, their weapons trained on her. Captain Rostova, stand down. The squad leader barked. You are in violation of Omnicorp security protocols. Eva grinned, a wild glint in her eyes. You'll have to take me alive. Inside the crystalline chamber, the large structure began to resonate with Paul's presence, emitting a beam of energy that enveloped him. His mind flooded with knowledge, the history of the planet, the purpose of the crystal, and the true nature of the virus he carried. The virus. It wasn't a disease at all. It was a symbiotic evolutionary adaptation, designed to protect the planet from external threats, to react to the energy of the crystal. Rhea stared at Paul, her face a mixture of awe and concern. Paul, what's happening? He looked at her, his eyes glowing with an inner light. They don't understand, he said, his voice resonating with newfound power. Omnicorp doesn't understand. They want to weaponize this energy, but they'll destroy the planet if they do. Back on the surface, Eva, pinned down behind a crumbling rock formation, activated her emergency comm. "This is Captain Rostova to Zephyr Station," she said, her voice strained. "Omnicorp is attempting to destabilize the planet. I repeat, Omnicorp is attempting to destabilize the planet. I need immediate assistance." The energy transfer stabilized Paul's condition and allowed him to partially control the shape-shifting abilities, just as he sensed that Eva is in dire need of help. He could feel her fear, her tenacity, her desperate need for assistance. He knew with absolute certainty that he had to help her. Paul closed his eyes, focusing. The cacophony of crumbling stone and the thrum of Omnicorp machinery faded, replaced by a faint, rhythmic pulse, Eva's heartbeat. He extended his awareness, pushing past the structural interference of the ancient ruins, the energy signature of the crystalline structure buzzing like static in his mind. "She's deeper in," he said, his voice strained. "Past the main excavation site, but injured. Badly." Rhea, her brow furrowed in concentration, tapped rapidly at her wrist-mounted datapad, holographic schematics of the ruins swirling around her. Dust motes danced in the pale light filtering through cracks in the ceiling. "There's a network of interconnected tunnels," she announced, pointing to a shimmering blue line on the display. "Unstable, but it's a faster route than going around. We'll have to be careful." They pressed onward, the air thick with the smell of ozone and pulverized rock. The deeper they went, the more frequent the automated defense systems became. Laser grids flickered to life, energy pulses arced through the corridors, but Paul was different now. His senses were amplified, his reflexes honed to a razor's edge. He anticipated the attacks, moving with a speed and grace that defied gravity, disabling the systems with precise strikes before they could fully activate. He was becoming something other than human, a terrifying blend of flesh and machine, but his enhanced abilities were keeping them alive. Ahead, a heavily guarded section of the tunnels pulsed with energy. Drones, sleek and menacing, patrolled the corridor, their sensors scanning for any sign of intrusion. Paul stopped, his eyes glowing with an eerie light. "I have an idea," he murmured, a strange smile playing on his lips. His body began to contort, his skin shimmering and shifting, mimicking the metallic texture and angular shapes of the drones. He wasn't a perfect copy, but close enough. "It's risky," Rhea said, her voice tight with concern. "We don't have a choice." Paul replied, his voice distorted and metallic. He moved forward, his gait mimicking the drone's mechanical movements. Rhea followed close behind, her heart pounding in her chest. The drones scanned them, their targeting systems momentarily confused by Paul's altered appearance. They passed through the checkpoint, the drones' cold, unblinking eyes following them until they were out of sight. They found Eva in a small, collapsed chamber, desperately fighting off a squad of Omnicorp security forces. She was bruised and bleeding, her movements labored, but her eyes still burned with defiance. She wielded a shattered piece of the crystalline structure as a weapon, deflecting energy blasts and improvising tactics to hold off her attackers. "Took you long enough," she grunted, slamming the crystal into the face of a mercenary. Adrenaline surged through Paul's veins, overriding his fear and exhaustion. The retrovirus roared within him, demanding release. He embraced it, letting it consume him. His body twisted and contorted, bones cracking and reforming, muscles bulging and tearing. He grew larger, more grotesque, his skin hardening into a chitinous armor, his hands morphing into razor-sharp claws. He was no longer Paul Baker, the engineer from the Stardust Drifter. He was a monster. The Omnicorp security squad barely had time to react before Paul unleashed his fury. He roared, a sound that echoed through the tunnels, and charged, his claws tearing through armor and flesh. Energy weapons were useless against his hardened hide. He moved with terrifying speed and strength, overwhelming the security squad in a matter of seconds. Rhea rushed to Eva's side, her medicine training kicking in. She assessed her injuries, her fingers probing for broken bones and internal bleeding. "We need to get you back to Zephyr Station," she said, her voice urgent. "You need proper treatment." She injected a fast-acting coagulant into Eva's arm, slowing the bleeding from a deep gash on her side. Suddenly, the ground trembled. A familiar, chilling voice echoed through the tunnels. "Impressive," Director Thorne said, his voice permeated with amusement. "But this little sideshow ends now." Thorne emerged from the shadows, flanked by a squad of heavily armed mercenaries and 2 advanced combat drones. The drones, sleek and lethal, were equipped with energy mistrals and a variety of weapon systems. "I must commend you, Mr. Baker," Thorne continued, his eyes fixed on Paul's monstrous form. "Your transformation is quite remarkable. It seems the retrovirus is even more potent, Mr. Han, we anticipated." He gestured dismissively. "You see, Ms. Varys, Mr. Baker, we weren't just after the energy source on this miserable rock. The retrovirus itself is the real prize. Imagine genetically enhanced soldiers, immune to disease, possessing superhuman strength and resilience. The possibilities are endless." Paul roared again, a sound filled with rage and defiance. He lunged at Thorne, but the combat drones intercepted him, their energy shields deflecting his attacks. Rhea grabbed Eva, pulling her behind a crumbling pillar for cover. "We need to get out of here," she shouted over the din of battle. They scrambled through the tunnels, Thorne's forces hot on their heels. Just as they reached a narrow passage, the ground shook violently. "Planetary lockdown initiated," Thorne's voice announced over the comms system. "No one leaves this planet." Metal shutters slammed down, sealing off the tunnels and cutting off any communication with the outside world. Eva leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. "I managed to send a partial distress signal," she said, her voice weak, "before the lockdown, but I don't know if it got through or if anyone will understand it." As they moved deeper into the tunnels, Paul could feel the crystalline structure resonating within him, amplifying the retrovirus's effects. His senses became even more acute, his shape-shifting abilities more fluid, but he also felt a growing sense of instability, as if his body was on the verge of tearing itself apart. Rhea, too, felt the effects of the crystals. Her analytical abilities were heightened, her mind racing with calculations and possibilities, but she also felt a strange disconnect from reality, as if she were floating outside of her own body. Suddenly, Paul stopped, his eyes wide with terror. He staggered back, clutching his head. I see something," he stammered, his voice filled with dread. A defense system, massive, dormant, hidden beneath the surface." Rhea's fingers flew across her datapad, analyzing the readings from her sensors. "He's right," she said, her voice hushed with awe and fear. "There's a hidden chamber, ancient technology, capable of controlling the planet's tectonic plates." Thorne's voice boomed over the comm system. "Begin excavation of the crystalline structure. Extract the energy. Weaponize it." The tunnels shook violently as Thorne's forces began their excavation, ignoring the potential consequences. Sections of the ceiling collapsed, sending showers of dust and debris raining down on them. Paul grabbed Rhea's arm, his grip tight. "They're going to awaken it," he said, his voice frantic. "The defense system. It will misinterpret their presence as a threat. It will initiate a global cleansing event." Rhea's eyes widened in horror. "The station," she whispered. "It will target Zepmister, Station 2. Thorne's laughter echoed through the tunnels. "Ah, Ms. Varys, Mr. Baker," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "I've been monitoring your little escapade. It seems you've become quite the problem. Time to eliminate the source." A red targeting laser appeared on the wall beside them, followed by the whine of a directed energy weapon charging up. Eva pushed them forward. "The tunnels ahead are collapsing," she yelled. "We don't have much time." Rhea's gaze darted around, her mind racing. "There," she shouted, pointing to a narrow crack in the wall. "A hidden path, a shortcut. It might lead us out of here before the tunnels collapse." Paul frowned. "It's too small, we won't all fit." Go, Paul grunted, his muscles straining against the constricting rock. Sweat plastered his hair to his forehead as he focused, manipulating his bone structure, widening the impossibly tight gap by millimeters. The air crackled with displaced energy. Eva, now, before I lose it. Rhea hesitated, her gaze darting between Paul's contorted face and Eva's pale, drawn features. The former security officer coughed, a crimson stain blossoming on her tattered uniform. This close, Rhea could see the tremor in Eva's hands, the desperate flicker in her eyes. Go, she croaked, her voice barely a whisper. Taking a breath, Rhea gripped Eva's arm, bracing herself against the rough-hewn rock. We'll find another way back, Paul, I promise. She pulled Eva forward, guiding her through the agonizingly narrow passage. Paul's pained grunts punctuated their slow progress. With a final, wrenching heave, Eva squeezed through. Paul released his hold, his body slumping against the tunnel wall. A low rumble echoed through the chamber. Crack. The tunnel entrance, Paul still partially within, buckled inward, sealing shut with a shower of dust and rock. Rhea cried out, reaching for the newly formed wall, her fingers scraping against the unyielding stone. Paul, no, he was gone. Rhea pounded on the rock, tears streaming down her face. Paul, can you hear me? Only silence answered. Eva, slumped against the opposite wall, managed a weak. He knew the risk, Rhea. We have to focus. Inside the collapsed tunnel, darkness pressed in on Paul. The air tasted of dust and ozone. He coughed, spitting out grit. All right, Thorne, he muttered, pushing himself to his feet. Let's see what you've got. He closed his eyes, focusing his energy, visualizing the faces of the miners he'd seen earlier. He shifted, his form blurring, multiplying until a dozen rough-looking figures in stained overalls and helmets milled about the tunnel, their voices a low murmur of fabricated conversation. Director Thorne stood at the edge of the collapse, his face a mask of cold fury. Impressive, Baker. But not good enough. He gestured to a technician who activated a handheld device. Deploy the trackers. His energy signature is too unique to mask completely. Miniature drones, no larger than insects, buzzed from the device, disappearing into the cracks and crevices of the tunnel walls. Rhea and Eva stumbled into a vast chamber, its walls covered in intricate carvings that pulsed with a faint, inner light. Consoles of an unknown metal lined the perimeter, their surfaces covered in glyphs. Where are we? Rhea asked, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. Eva coughed again, clutching her side. The control room. I recognize it. She swayed, then caught herself against a console. I was part of the original survey team before I saw what OmniCorp was really about. Rhea rushed to her side, activating her medical scanner. Your injuries are severe. We need to stabilize you. She ran the scanner over the console, its sensors whirring. There's a direct feedback loop between brain waves and the system. It needs a biological interface. Below, the drones homed in on Paul's location. Thorne watched on a holographic display as a red dot pulsed on the screen. He's near the excavation site. Seal off all exits. I want him alive. He wanted the retrovirus. He wanted the shape-shifting ability. He wanted it all for OmniCorp. Then we'll activate the planetary defense system. With the mining rights secured, no one will be able to compete with OmniCorp. Paul burst from a side tunnel, only to be met by a wall of energy rifles. Thorne stepped forward, a cruel smile twisting his lips. Nowhere left to run, Baker. Surrender the retrovirus and I promise you a quick death. Rage flared in Paul's chest, fueled by the pain of his injuries and the knowledge of OmniCorp's ruthless ambition. He roared, a primal sound that echoed through the chamber and unleashed a surge of viral energy. A shockwave ripped through the tunnel, disabling the drones and sending Thorne's soldiers sprawling. But the surge left Paul weakened, his vision blurring, his body trembling uncontrollably. In the control room, Rhea stared at the holographic map that sprang to life above the central console. A web of energy lines crisscrossed the planet's surface, converging on a single point, Zephyr Station. Eva, look, it's targeting the station. Eva, her face pale and drawn, pointed to a flashing icon. The system misinterprets its orbital position as a threat. We have very little time. Thorn raised his energy weapon, its barrel glowing with lethal power. Time to end this, Baker. He aimed at Paul's chest. OmniCorp will extract the retrovirus, one way or another. Before he could fire, the ground beneath them trembled. A deafening roar filled the air as the excavation site collapsed, a blinding surge of energy erupting from the crystalline structure. Thorn and his soldiers were thrown back like rag dolls. Paul, bathed in the energy, felt a surge of power course through his veins. For a fleeting moment, his mind cleared, reaching out across the distance, connecting with Rhea. Rhea, the defense system. Destroy it. The connection severed, leaving him gasping for breath, his body racked with pain. Above, energy beams lanced from the planet's surface, striking Zephyr Station with devastating force. Explosions rocked the station, tearing through HAB modules and cargo bays. Panic erupted as alarms blared and emergency lights flickered. Rhea desperately tried to override the system, but the control panel remained unresponsive. It needs a specific biological signature, she cried, frustration lacing her voice. We don't have it. More energy beams struck the station, ripping through its defenses. The holographic map flickered, displaying the escalating damage and casualty reports. Eva straightened, her eyes filled with a grim determination. I do. She stepped towards the console, her hand outstretched. My genetic makeup, it's the closest. I was part of the original team, remember. They used our DNA to calibrate the system. Rhea stared at her, horror dawning in her eyes. Eva, no, you can't. I have to, Eva said, her voice firm. It's the only way. She looked at Rhea, a flicker of regret in her eyes. Tell Paul. Tell him I'm sorry. With a trembling hand, Eva pressed her palm against the control panel. A surge of energy crackled around her, illuminating her face with an eerie glow. The system responded, the targeting matrix shifting, the energy beams retracting from Zephyr Station. But the overload was immediate, catastrophic. A blinding flash engulfed the control room. The console exploded in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The walls crumbled, the ceiling collapsed. Rhea screamed, shielding her face from the blast. When the dust settled, Rhea lay amidst the rubble, her ears ringing, her body aching. She pushed herself to her feet, her vision blurred. The control room was a ruin, the ancient technology shattered beyond repair. Eva was gone, and Paul was still in Thorn's clutches, the station burning overhead. Rhea stood alone amidst the wreckage, the full weight of the disaster crashing down upon her. Zephyr Station was dying, Paul was lost, and Eva had given everything. The acrid scent of ozone stung Rhea's nostrils, a grim reminder of Eva's sacrifice. The control room was a mangled mess of sparking wires and shattered consoles, the emergency lights casting long, dancing shadows across the wreckage. Grief, sharp and sudden, pierced through her, followed by a chilling wave of fear for Paul. And then the crushing weight of responsibility for the station, for everyone still trapped within its metallic shell. She fumbled for the emergency communications panel, her fingers slick with a mixture of sweat and something she didn't want to identify. Static crackled in her ears as she cycled through the channels. Fragments of desperate voices broke through the noise. Structural damage. Sector 4 collapsing. OmniCorp security, seizing control. Casualties mounting, need immediate assistance. Rhea tried to raise the Stardust Drifter, her voice tight with anxiety. Stardust Drifter, this is Nurse Rhea on Zephyr Station. Do you read? Paul, are you there? Only static answered. She adjusted the frequency, her heart pounding against her ribs. The signal was weak, intermittent, swallowed by the station's crippled comms array. A groan from nearby drew her attention. Partially buried under a fallen panel, a group of station residents huddled together, their faces streaked with grime and blood. Among them, she recognized the pointed ears and blue skin of a Talaxian. Driven by her medical oath, Rhea scrambled toward them, her training kicking in. "I'm a nurse. What are your injuries?" She quickly assessed the situation, triaging the wounded. A human woman with a broken leg, a Grocknar child with severe burns, and the Talaxian, his arm pinned beneath a heavy beam. "The life support. It's failing," the Talaxian gasped, his voice strained. "Structural integrity is compromised. The station. It won't hold for long." "What's your name?" Rhea asked, efficiently applying a pressure bandage to the woman's leg. "Jackson, I'm an engineer." He winced as Rhea carefully shifted the beam off his arm. "Omnicorp. They're prioritizing their own, blocking the evacuation routes." Rhea's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Jackson coughed, his face contorted in pain. "I overheard their comms. They're sealing off the escape pods, diverting resources to their personnel, leaving the rest of us to die." Rage, cold and sharp, replaced the grief. "There has to be another way." Jackson nodded, his eyes filled with fierce dedication. "There's a network of maintenance tunnels. They connect to an emergency escape pod bay on the far side of the station. It's a long shot, but it's our only chance." Meanwhile, deep beneath the station, at the crystalline excavation site, Director Thorne surveyed his domain. Omnicorp security forces, clad in black armor, formed a tight perimeter around the dig site. The air crackled with the energy emanating from the exposed crystal. "Secure the perimeter," Thorne barked into his comm. "Eliminate any resistance. Prepare the transport vessels. The crystal leaves within the hour." He didn't bother to hide the ruthless satisfaction in his voice. The planet's fate was irrelevant. Profit was all that mattered. In Omnicorp's makeshift laboratory, Paul was strapped to a metal table, his body slick with sweat. Scientists in sterile suits hovered around him, their faces obscured by masks. Pain lanced through his veins as they injected him with another cocktail of experimental compounds, attempting to isolate and weaponize the retrovirus. His muscles bulged, veins throbbing beneath his skin. The dual heart system was working overtime, pumping the experimental drugs through his enhanced circulatory system. His vision blurred, and his mind swam in a sea of fragmented thoughts and memories. Unbidden, bursts of raw energy erupted from his body, arcing across the laboratory. Suddenly, images flooded his mind, a vast, alien landscape bathed in the eerie glow of twin suns. A sleek, silver ship descending towards an uncharted planet, the faces of his ancestors, their eyes wide with wonder and fear. He saw them encountering a strange energy surge, a dormant retrovirus buried deep within the planet's core, the origin of his dual hearts, his enhanced strength, his curse. Back in the tunnels, Rhea and Jackson led the group of survivors through the dimly lit corridors, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. The silence was punctuated by the drip, drip, drip of condensation and the occasional scuttling of unseen creatures. "Stay close," Rhea whispered, her pulse rifle held ready. Omnicorp patrols could be anywhere. They rounded a corner and nearly collided with two armored figures. Shots rang out, echoing through the narrow passage. Rhea and Jackson returned fire, forcing the patrol to retreat. Deeper in the tunnels, tucked away in a hidden alcove, Rhea stumbled upon a metal container. Inside, nestled among layers of protective foam, lay a deactivated Talaxian medical drone. Its sleek, chrome body was covered in dust, but Rhea recognized its advanced diagnostic and repair capabilities. "Jackson, can you reactivate this?" she asked, her voice filled with a sudden surge of hope. Jackson examined the drone, his fingers flying across its control panel. "It's been offline for years, but I think I can do it." Working together, they bypassed the drone's security protocols and rerouted its power core. With a surge of energy, the drone flickered to life, its optical sensors glowing with a soft blue light. "I can use this to stabilize the station's life support," Rhea said, her voice filled with renewed commitment. "And maybe, just maybe, locate Paul. As they approached the emergency escape pod bay, Rhea's comm unit crackled to life. It was a garbled message barely audible above the static. Stardust Drifter, approaching Zephyr Station. Heavy resistance, Omnicorp. Then, a new voice, distorted and panicked, broke through on the station's emergency channel. Core destabilized. Crystalline energy source. Planetary explosion imminent. Repeat, planetary explosion imminent if the crystal is removed. Rhea froze, her blood turning to ice. Escape the station, save the survivors, or stay and try to prevent a planetary explosion. The choice was impossible. The escape pod bay felt miles away. No, escaping felt like a betrayal. Rhea stared at the flashing emergency exit sign, its strobing light painting the faces of the survivors in a frantic, desperate flicker. Cowardice, she thought, the word a cold shard in her mind. The station groaned again, a low, guttural sound that vibrated through the deck plating. If she left, who would even try to save the rest? "We stay," she announced, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in her hands. "We try to stabilize the core. It's a long shot, but running is just a slower death." A murmur rippled through the group. Jackson, his face smudged with grease, stepped forward. "What's the plan, Doc?" Rhea pointed toward a medical drone hovering uselessly near a diagnostics terminal. "That drone, it can still access the station's repair protocols. Jackson, you know these systems. Can you help me reprogram it to target the damaged sections of the life support?" He nodded, a spark of purpose in his eyes. "I can try, but the power fluctuations are making everything unstable." Working quickly, they bypassed the drone's medical programming, rerouting its energy matrix to prioritize environmental controls. The drone whirred to life, its optical sensors glowing an eerie blue. Rhea input the coordinates of the damaged oxygen regulators and gravity stabilizers. The drone darted away, a tiny beacon of hope in the failing station. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then, a flicker of the emergency lights, the oxygen levels were stabilizing. A collective sigh swept through the group as the drone continued its work, patching the failing gravity regulators. The sickening lurch of the station lessened, but the deep rumble of planetary instability grew louder, an ominous counterpoint to their small victory. Rhea needed more information. She turned to the drone's communication array. "Can you patch me through to Paul?" she asked Jackson. "I need to know what he's learned about that retrovirus." Jackson frowned. "The comms are barely functional, but I can try to boost the signal." He worked frantically, rerouting power from a backup generator. Static crackled through the air, then, faint and distorted, a voice. Not Paul's. Isolated, concentrated, retrovirus. Rhea's blood ran cold. She adjusted the frequency, filtering out the static. It was Omnicorp, or what was left of them. Crystalline energy, weaponization. Jackson swore under his breath. They're not just trying to control it, they're turning it into a weapon. Rhea felt a surge of adrenaline. What kind of weapon? "One that could wipe out entire planets," Jackson said grimly, "if they amplify the virus's effects with that energy source." Before they could delve deeper, a klaxon blared, red lights flashed. "Security breach," a robotic voice announced. "Intruders detected in maintenance tunnels. Sector 7 compromised." "Omnicorp," Rhea hissed. "They're coming for us." "We have to move," Jackson said, grabbing a discarded plasma torch. "But we can't just run, not anymore." They navigated the labyrinthine tunnels, the rumble of the collapsing station growing louder with each passing moment. Rhea could hear the heavy thud of armored boots behind them, the relentless pursuit of Omnicorp security. Inside Omnicorp's lab, Director Thorne paced impatiently. "Why the delay?" he snarled at a trembling scientist. "I ordered the weaponization process accelerated." "But Director," the scientist stammered, "bypassing the safety protocols could trigger a catastrophic energy surge. The planet—" "I don't care about the planet," Thorne roared. "I care about the weapon. Now get it done." As the scientists reluctantly complied, forcing the crystalline energy through the retroviral matrix, Paul felt a jolt, a surge of raw power that ripped through his mind. Images flashed before his eyes: a barren planet, a crashed ship, his ancestor, bathed in an unearthly glow, a crystalline structure pulsing with energy. The memory faded, leaving Paul gasping for breath. He understood now. The retrovirus wasn't a disease, it was a key to unlocking the potential to adapt to any environment, no matter how hostile. His ancestor had been exposed to the crystalline energy, triggering the virus and allowing him to survive on that alien world. The crystalline energy. It was amplifying the virus, forcing his body to mutate at an accelerated rate. But what if he could control it? What if he could consciously guide the mutation? He focused his mind, visualizing the changes he wanted to make. He felt his bones shifting, his muscles growing denser, his senses sharpening. The pain was excruciating, but he pushed through it, channeling the energy, shaping his body. He was no longer a victim. He was in control. Back in the maintenance tunnels, Rhea and Jackson reached the emergency escape pod bay. Their hearts sank. Only one pod remained, a large, luxurious model clearly reserved for VIPs. They disabled the others, Jackson said, his voice flat. That son of a bitch Thorn is saving himself. Rhea stared at the single pod, then at the faces of the survivors behind her. She couldn't leave them, not again. We're not using it to escape, she said, a plan forming in her mind. We're going to reprogram it. Use it to deliver a targeted energy pulse to the planet's core. Maybe, just maybe, we can stabilize it. She began working on the pod's control panel, rerouting its power conduits, modifying its launch sequence. Jackson stood guard, plasma torch raised, listening for the approaching security forces. Suddenly the drone's comm channel crackled to life. This time it was Paul. Rhea, can you hear me? His voice was stronger, clearer than before. Paul, what happened? Where are you? I understand the virus, he said urgently. And the crystalline energy. It's not about destruction, Rhea. It's about adaptation. The energy is amplifying the virus's properties. You need to recalibrate the energy pulse. Maximize its stabilizing effect, minimize the risk of an explosion. He rattled off a series of complex calculations, frequencies, and energy levels. Rhea frantically entered the data into the pod's control panel. Paul, what are you going to do? She asked, her voice trembling. I'm coming to help you, he said. Just hold on. As Rhea finished the recalibration, the bay doors hissed open. Director Thorne stood there, flanked by two heavily armed guards. He held a small case in his hand, the weaponized retrovirus. Well, he sneered. Looks like you're not going anywhere. Rhea slammed her hand on the desk, the sound echoing in Thorne's opulent office. That's enough, Director. I've seen the data, the experiments. You've been weaponizing the retrovirus and using Paul as a test subject. Her voice, though controlled, vibrated with barely suppressed fury. The double beat of her heart thrummed in her chest, a Talaxian physiological response to extreme stress, a sensation Paul had taught her to recognize in herself. Thorne leaned back in his chair, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. Nurse Rhea, always so. Ernest, you misunderstand. I wasn't weaponizing anything. I was preparing a defense. Imagine a bioweapon tailored to alien physiology, a deterrent against any potential threat to humanity. He gestured expansively. I was acting in the best interests of mankind, a heavy burden that I assure you, you are not equipped to carry. Disgust coiled in Rhea's stomach. You callously experimented on a human being, risked countless lives, all based on a hypothetical threat. That's not defense, that's madness. She activated her calm. Security, this is Nurse Rhea. I'm placing Director Thorne under arrest for unauthorized experimentation and violation of the Zephyr Station biohazard protocols. Seal his office. Level 5 security clearance required. 2 security officers, a hulking Krogan and a nervous-looking human, arrived moments later, their weapons drawn. Thorne didn't resist, his expression a mask of wounded pride. You'll regret this, Nurse. You've doomed us all. As they led him away, Rhea focused on securing the weaponized retrovirus sample, a vial of shimmering green liquid locked in a reinforced container. Suddenly, Jackson's voice crackled over her comm. "Rhea, we have a problem. One of the OmniCorp engineers who survived the containment breach just confessed. There's a hidden override code for the escape pods. Thorn can disable the life support systems remotely, even from a holding cell." Rhea's blood ran cold. Thorn, even imprisoned, was still a threat. She thought of the survivors huddled in the escape pod, their hopes pinned on reaching a habitable planet. She thought of Paul, his life already irrevocably altered. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her. She had a choice, a terrible one. Her hand trembled as she accessed the escape pod's control panel. The override code was there, buried deep within the system's architecture. She could use it, severing Thorn's connection, ensuring the survivor's safety. But it meant condemning him, a calculated execution. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. With a decisive movement, she entered the code. A confirmation flashed on the screen. Thorn's connection was severed. Time was running out. The escape pod was prepped for launch, but the crystalline energy source remained unstable. Paul, despite his weakened state, had been working tirelessly, analyzing the data, searching for a solution. His voice, strained but determined, filled her calm. "Rhea, I've got it." Transmitting detailed schematics of the core structure now. The key is the resonant frequency. If we can match it precisely, we can stabilize the energy flow. The schematics appeared on her screen, a complex web of crystalline lattices and energy pathways. Rhea relayed the information to Jackson, who was working frantically to recalibrate the escape pod's energy pulse generator. "Increase the modulation frequency by 0.7%, Jackson, and adjust the amplitude to compensate for the planetary magnetic field. Paul says it's critical." Minutes stretched into an eternity as Jackson worked. Finally, he gave a thumbs up. "Ready to go, Rhea. We've incorporated Paul's specifications. The energy pulse is optimized for stabilization." Rhea took a deep breath. "Program the escape pod to target the planetary core's resonant frequency. Increase the power output gradually, Jackson. We can't risk triggering a catastrophic surge." She paused, her voice hardening with grim commitment. "This is likely a one-way trip. I'll have to manually detonate the energy pulse at close range to ensure complete stabilization." Jackson exploded. "No. There has to be another way, a remote trigger, a failsafe, anything. I'm not letting you go on a suicide mission, Rhea." His voice was raw with emotion, a confession of feelings he had long suppressed. Rhea placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but firm. "There isn't, Jackson, we both know it. This is the only way to be sure. You need to lead the survivors to safety, Jackson. You're the best chance they have." She looked into his eyes, her own filled with a mixture of sadness and willpower. And thank you for everything." A tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. As she turned to enter the escape pod, the station lurched violently. Alarms blared as the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, throwing her off balance. Sparks flew from a damaged control panel. "Rhea, what's happening?" Jackson yelled over the comm, his voice filled with panic. "Sabotage," she gasped, struggling to regain her footing. OmniCorp loyalists are still active on the station. They're diverting power from essential systems, trying to stop the launch. Suddenly, Paul's voice cut through the chaos, calm and collected. "I'm on it, Rhea. Stand by." A moment later, the gravity stabilized and the alarm subsided. "I've rerouted power from the auxiliary generators. The launch sequence is restored." Rhea initiated the launch sequence, the escape pod shuddering as it broke free from the station's docking clamps. The turbulent atmosphere of the unstable planet buffeted the small craft as it plunged towards the surface, fighting against the gravitational pull. As the escape pod approached the planetary core, a powerful energy surge erupted from OmniCorp's abandoned laboratory, a wave of raw power that threatened to engulf the craft. "Rhea, be careful." Paul's voice was tight with alarm. Thorn activated a failsafe before he was apprehended. He's trying to overload the crystalline energy source. If that happens... Rhea gripped the controls, her mind racing. Abort the mission, escape while she still could, and condemn the planet to destruction. Or proceed with the energy pulse and risk triggering a catastrophic explosion that could wipe out everything. The fate of Zephyr Station, the survivors, Paul, and perhaps even herself, hung in the balance. Rhea gripped the controls, her squeezing hard. No turning back now. The energy surge hadn't abated, the escape pod shuddering violently as it pierced the planet's disintegrating atmosphere. She contacted Paul. "Paul, I'm in. The planet's even worse than the scans indicated. The failsafe is active." A static-laced voice crackled back. "Understood, Rhea. I'm pulling up Omnicorp schematics now. Thorn really buried this thing deep. Access is restricted, and the security protocols are a nightmare." Outside, the viewscreen displayed a chaotic panorama of crystalline shards, glittering like malevolent jewels as they tumbled through space. Each impact against the pod sent a jarring vibration through her seat. "I've found something," Paul said, his voice strained. "The failsafe isn't just a single trigger, it's linked to a secondary crystalline node, deep within Omnicorp's abandoned research lab on the surface." Rhea frowned. "A node? What does that mean?" "It means disabling the failsafe requires a precise energy pulse targeted at that secondary node. It's almost a mirror image of the initial stabilization process they used to corrupt the planet." The escape pod scanner pinged incessantly as Rhea fought to maintain control. "I'm picking up the node's location, but there's massive interference from the planet's magnetic field. It's like trying to find a needle in a cosmic haystack." "Give me a few minutes," Paul replied, his fingers flying across his console. "I think I can devise an algorithm to filter out the noise. It's going to be complex, but..." A pause. "Just uploaded it, try that." Rhea ran the algorithm. The scanner display sharpened, resolving into a precise pinpoint. "Got it. Coordinates locked." "Thanks, Paul, you're a lifesaver." "Don't thank me yet," Paul said grimly. "I'm also picking up multiple energy signatures approaching your location. Looks like a ground vehicle heavily armored. Omnicorp loyalists, probably." Rhea squinted at her sensors. A blip was rapidly closing the distance. "They're heading straight for the secondary node. What are they planning?" "My guess." Paul's voice was tight. "They intend to manually trigger the failsafe, make absolutely sure the planet goes boom and you can't stabilize it." Rhea's blood ran cold. "Then I have to stop them, but firing the energy pulse while they're there." "Paul, it'll trigger a chain reaction. They'll be caught in the blast." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the escape pod's engines. Rhea swallowed hard. I have to try and warn them." She opened a channel on the emergency frequencies. "Attention, Omnicorp vehicle approaching the secondary crystalline node. This is Rhea. I'm an independent agent attempting to stabilize the planet. The failsafe is active. You are in immediate danger. Evacuate the area." A distorted voice snarled back. "Nice try, traitor. We know your game. We're here to finish what Thorn started. The galaxy is better off without this rock." Rhea's heart sank. "You don't understand. You'll be killed." The voice chuckled. "We're not afraid to die for the cause, preparing to manually override the failsafe now." Rhea stared at the targeting reticle, her hand hovering over the firing button. There's no other way. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and fired. The energy pulse lanced out, striking the secondary node with pinpoint accuracy. A blinding flash erupted, followed by a deafening roar. The Omnicorp vehicle vanished in a supernova of crystalline energy. The explosion unleashed a shockwave that ripped through the surrounding landscape, destabilizing the already fragile crystalline structures. The escape pod bucked violently, alarms blaring. "Rhea, what happened?" Paul's voice was frantic. I did it, Paul. I disabled the failsafe. But the explosion, it's destabilizing everything. The escape pod is losing power. We're going down." The pod plummeted, spinning wildly as the planet's gravity clawed at it. Emergency lights flickered on, casting long, dancing shadows across the cramped cockpit. "I'm trying to reroute power," Rhea shouted, wrestling with the controls. "Navigation systems are fried. I can't stabilize the descent." "There has to be something," Paul said, his voice strained with urgency. "Check the emergency power cells. Can you reroute them to the pulse generator?" Rhea slammed her fist on the console in frustration. "There's not enough power. The only way to realign the energy pulse generator is a manual override, but that means I have to go into the engine compartment. It's exposed. The radiation levels will be lethal." The radiation alarm blared, a shrill counterpoint to the groaning metal of the escape pod. Rhea pushed through the cramped access tunnel, her lungs burning with each breath. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of ionized particles, stinging her eyes. She reached the engine compartment, a claustrophobic space filled with sparking wires and hissing coolant lines. The emergency lights flickered erratically, casting grotesque shadows that danced with the tremors racking the pod. Radiation crackled against her protective suit, a tangible weight. She ignored the escalating warnings and focused on the manual override panel. Her fingers, clumsy in their protective gloves, fumbled with the recalibration sequence. Sweat beaded on her brow, blurring her vision. Finally, with a satisfying clunk, the last relay clicked into place. The violent shaking subsided, replaced by a low hum. Through the viewport, Rhea watched as the escape pod's trajectory corrected, pulling away from the swirling crimson glow of the planetary core. Relief washed over her, quickly replaced by a chilling unease. A shimmering distortion rippled across the viewport, centered on the crystalline core. It pulsed with an unnatural light, accompanied by a low, resonant hum that vibrated through her bones. The ripple effect spread rapidly, engulfing the entire planetary structure. The escape pod bucked and shuddered, the crystalline formations below glowing with an eerie, amplified luminescence. Alarms screamed, their cacophony merging into a single, piercing tone. Rhea stared at the readings on her console, her analytical mind struggling to comprehend the impossible data. The stabilization process hadn't just averted destruction, it had created something far more dangerous, a localized singularity within the planet's crystalline core. The singularity expanded with terrifying speed, a black void swallowing the light around it. It warped space itself, bending the stars into grotesque, elongated streaks. The gravity readings spiked, pinning Rhea against her seat. On Zephyr Station, Paul stared at the OmniCorp schematics, his brow furrowed in concentration. He ran a diagnostic sweep, searching for anomalies. A faint, almost imperceptible pattern shimmered beneath the surface layer, a hidden message, encrypted with a complex algorithm. His fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing the security protocols. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, resolving into coherent text. The failsafe wasn't just designed to destroy the planet. It was intended to weaponize the singularity. The blood ran cold in Paul's veins. He deciphered the remaining lines, revealing OmniCorp's ultimate ambition, to use the singularity as a hyperspace conduit, a wormhole for rapid interstellar travel, regardless of the consequences. Planetary destruction was merely an acceptable loss. Rhea's actions while saving the planet from immediate annihilation had inadvertently triggered OmniCorp's grand and horrifying design. He had to warn her. Paul banged his hand on the comms panel, initiating a priority transmission. Static crackled in his ears, punctuated by bursts of distorted noise. "Rhea, do you read? Rhea, OmniCorp. The singularity, it's a trap." The energy signature was interfering with the signals, turning his warning into garbled noise. Inside the escape pod, Rhea felt a sudden surge of energy, a jolt that sent sparks flying from the console. The pod lurched violently, throwing her against the restraining straps. The singularity's gravitational pull intensified, dragging the escape pod downwards towards the planet's core. Through the distorted viewport, Rhea saw it a massive, artificial structure emerging from the singularity. It was an incomplete hyperspace gate, its skeletal frame shimmering with raw power. The gate was drawing energy from the singularity, accelerating its expansion, feeding on the very fabric of space-time. She activated the emergency beacon, sending out a distress signal. But the singularity's gravitational field twisted the signal, garbling its message, reducing it to a faint whisper in the void. The distorted signal reached a nearby vessel, its hull emblazoned with the OmniCorp logo. The vessel immediately altered its course, accelerating towards the unstable planet. Its mission: secure the hyperspace gate and eliminate Rhea, preventing her from interfering with their plans. Rhea stared at the approaching vessel, her heart pounding in her chest. She was trapped, caught between the expanding singularity and the approaching OmniCorp vessel, with no hope of escape. The escape pod shuddered violently, a cacophony of alarms blaring as the artificial gravity flickered erratically. Rhea gripped the edge of her seat, her stomach lurching as the pod was tossed about like a child's toy. Sparks erupted from a damaged console, filling the cramped space with the acrid smell of burning plastic. "Systems failing across the board," she shouted over the din, her voice tight with urgency. "Gravitational stabilizers are offline. Life support is marginal." Paul, bracing himself against a wall, gritted his teeth. "Give me something to work with, Doc. Anything." Rhea, ever the pragmatist, was already tearing apart a medkit, stripping wires from bio-monitors and rerouting power cables. "I can bypass the environmental controls to reroute power to the stabilizers, but it'll be a temporary fix. Maybe 5-10 minutes, tops." Her fingers flew across the damaged panel, her Talaxian dexterity a blur of motion. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the comm system, smooth and menacing. "Escape Pod Zephyr 7. This is OmniCorp security vessel retribution. Surrender immediately. Your cooperation will be beneficial." Rhea spat. "Go to hell, OmniCorp." She keyed the comm. "This is Medical Officer Rhea, transmitting a Priority 1 distress signal. Zephyr Station, do you read? I repeat, this is a Priority 1 distress signal." She transmitted a coded burst, a complex sequence designed to bypass OmniCorp's jamming and alert station command to their plight. A low hum resonated through the pod as a blue energy field enveloped them. "Tractor beam engaged," Paul announced grimly. "They've got us." The pod groaned under the strain, metal protesting against the invisible force pulling them inexorably towards the retribution. "Damn it!" Paul slammed a fist against the console. An idea sparked in his eyes. "Rhea, can you give me access to Zephyr Station's internal comm channels from here?" "It's a long shot, but maybe," she replied, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I can try to piggyback on the distress signal, but it'll be risky. It could fry the whole system. We don't have a choice." Paul's expression was grim, resolute. He rerouted power from the emergency lighting, diverting it to the comm system. His fingers danced across the console, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease. A string of code appeared on the screen. He hit enter. "This is Paul Baker," his voice echoed through the station's internal channels, overridden and raw. "OmniCorp is attempting to weaponize the singularity. They're not here to study it, they're going to use it. Do not trust them. Repeat, do not trust OmniCorp." The effect was immediate. Alarms blared across the station as Paul's message cut through the carefully orchestrated comm. Reports flooded the comm channels. Security forces scrambled, unsure who to trust. In the Retribution's control center, chaos erupted as officers argued and shouted. "They're trying to trace the signal," Rhea yelled. Paul ignored her, his focus unwavering. He knew this was a gamble, but it was the only chance he had to warn the station. He just needed to buy Rhea some time. Suddenly, the pod lurched violently. The tractor beam intensified, pulling them faster towards the Retribution. Rhea cursed in Talaxian, her fingers flying across the console. I'm trying to override the tractor beam's frequency, but their system is heavily shielded. I can't get a lock. Then, the artificial structure at the heart of the singularity pulsed with an eerie violet light. An invisible wave of energy washed over the escape pod and all the systems went dead. The alarms fell silent. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. What was that? Paul asked, his voice a hushed whisper. I don't know, Rhea replied, her voice trembling slightly. But the structure, it's amplifying the singularity's power, it's growing faster. Paul swore under his breath. He knew they were running out of time. He frantically scanned the escape pod schematics, searching for any possible solution. There, he said, pointing to a small, almost forgotten access panel. There's a maintenance tunnel that leads to a derelict spacecraft hangar. It's a long shot, but it's our only chance. Outside, the Retribution locked onto the escape pod, preparing to bring it aboard. The low hum of the tractor beam grew louder, more insistent. Rhea stared at the dead console, her mind racing. She couldn't override the tractor beam, the systems were completely fried, but there was one thing she could do, a desperate, dangerous idea. Paul, she said, her voice tight with willpower. I have a plan, it's insane, but it might work. What is it? I'm going to detach the power core. Paul stared at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. You're crazy, that'll kill the life support. We'll be stranded. It'll also create a localized energy surge, she explained, her voice urgent. Enough to disrupt the tractor beam, at least for a few seconds. It's our only chance to break free. Without waiting for his response, Rhea reached for the emergency release lever. With a sharp pull, the power core detached with a deafening clang, bathing the pod in a blinding flash of energy. The tractor beam flickered, sputtered, and died. The pod, momentarily free, drifted uncontrollably towards the singularity. Now what? Rhea asked, her voice barely a whisper. Paul, ignoring the pod's uncontrolled spin, accessed a small, outdated shuttle. I'm going to try to launch this thing towards the planet. It's a long shot, but... As the shuttle's engine sputtered to life, Omnicorp security forces cornered Paul, weapons raised. Baker, stand down. But it was too late. The escape pod, now completely powerless, was drawn inexorably towards the artificial structure at the heart of the singularity. With a final, sickening lurch, it vanished, disappearing from all sensor readings. Paul slammed the shuttle's throttle forward, the engine screaming as the vessel lurched towards the swirling vortex of the approaching singularity. Behind them, ruby laser fire from Omnicorp security vessels scorched the void, narrowly missing the Stardust Drifter's escape shuttle. Rhea, get to the escape pod. He yelled over the comms, his voice tight with urgency. Rhea, already scrambling towards the designated bay, barely had time to acknowledge before the pod launched, a minuscule silver dart swallowed by the immense gravity well. Inside, alarms blared as the artificial structure pulled her in, a disorienting rush of G-forces pinning her to the seat. Then, silence. The alarms ceased. The pod floated weightlessly in a cavernous chamber bathed in ethereal blue light. Ancient symbols pulsed on the walls. The structure's internal systems activated, humming with forgotten power. Rhea's Talaxian analytical mind kicked into overdrive. She accessed the pod's limited sensors, cross-referencing the symbols with her databanks. Then, she found it a match in a restricted archive. Paul, she transmitted, her voice imbued with awe, this isn't just a random anomaly. It's a containment structure built by an ancient civilization to stabilize singularities. I'm accessing their records now. They were trying to understand them, control them. Back on the Stardust Drifter, Paul, dodging laser fire with practiced ease, received Rhea's transmission. A voice crackled over his comms, Captain Eva Rostova of Zephyr Station Security. Baker, we got your warning. We're mobilizing a fleet, but we're still minutes out. We've analyzed the singularity's energy signature. There's a frequency modulator on board your shuttle. It might be your only chance to penetrate the field. Ria's voice cut in. Paul, I've found the containment protocols. The structure uses specific frequencies to dampen the singularity's energy. I'm transmitting them to you now. You need to match those frequencies with the modulator. Sweat beaded on Paul's forehead as he wrestled the shuttle through a hail of plasma fire. Easier said than done, Ria. This modulator is designed for subspace comms, not singularity containment. He ripped open an access panel, exposing a tangle of wires and circuits. Gotta improvise. He grabbed his engineering tools, his fingers flying across the components, rerouting power conduits and recalibrating the frequency emitters. Suddenly, a squadron of Omnicorp fighters materialized in front of him, blocking his path. Baker, you are in violation of corporate law. Stand down. A voice boomed over the comms. Sorry, not today, Paul replied, a grim smile playing on his lips. He activated the shuttle's weapon systems, unleashing a barrage of energy bolts. The Omnicorp fighters returned fire, but Paul, fueled by the retrovirus and the adrenaline coursing through his veins, was too fast. His reflexes were lightning quick. He dodged and weaved through the laser fire, his enhanced strength allowing him to perform maneuvers that would have been impossible for a normal pilot. He disabled the Omnicorp security vessels, targeting their power cores with pinpoint accuracy. Inside the singularity structure, Ria watched the sensor readings with held breath. Paul, the modulator, you need to fine-tune the frequencies. The singularity is destabilizing. I'm working on it, Paul yelled back, his fingers dancing across the modified modulator controls. He glanced at the readings Ria had sent, his mind racing. He could feel the hum of the singularity, the raw power threatening to overwhelm him. Almost there. Adjust the tertiary frequency by 0.05%. Ria instructed, her voice calm despite the rising tension. Paul made the adjustment. A wave of energy pulsed from the shuttle, resonating with the structure around Ria. The singularity began to shrink, its chaotic energy coalescing into a more stable form. The swirling vortex calmed. The structure hummed with renewed power. It's working, Paul. You're stabilizing it. Ria exclaimed, relief flooding her voice. As the singularity stabilized, the ancient structure revealed another secret, a hidden chamber containing a vast database. Paul, I'm accessing their archives. They studied retroviruses. They have treatments, cures, everything. Working together, Ria deciphered the ancient data, while Paul used his engineering skills to adapt the ancient treatments to modern technology. They found a way to control the retrovirus within Paul, preventing further mutations and stabilizing his condition. He was still enhanced, still stronger and faster than an ordinary human, but he was no longer a danger to himself or others. Moments later, Zephyr Station security forces arrived, securing the singularity and arresting the remaining Omnicorp operatives. Captain Rostova approached Paul, her expression grim. Baker, you've saved Zephyr Station, maybe the entire sector, but Omnicorp's actions, they're beyond the pale. We're launching a full investigation. Ria and Paul presented their evidence to the galactic community, exposing Omnicorp's unethical experiments and their attempts to weaponize Paul's unique physiology. The outcry was immediate and widespread. Omnicorp's stock plummeted. Their operations were suspended. Their leaders faced criminal charges. Weeks later, standing on the bridge of the Stardust Drifter, Paul looked at Ria, his eyes filled with love and gratitude. Ready for a new adventure, Ria smiled, her hand resting on his. Always, but this time we're not just exploring, we're helping people. The Stardust Drifter set course for the outer reaches of the galaxy, carrying Paul and Ria on a mission of hope. They sought out others like Paul, individuals with unique genetic anomalies and retroviral conditions, offering them treatment and a chance to live normal lives. They became interstellar doctors, healers, and ambassadors of human ingenuity and interspecies cooperation. They found acceptance among the crew of the Stardust Drifter, who had once been wary of Paul's condition. And Ria's family, initially skeptical of her relationship with a human, came to admire Paul's courage and compassion. The galaxy was a vast and dangerous place, but with their combined